You wake in the deep stillness that comes well before sunrise, when the darkness outside the paper screen is still complete, and the air inside the small room holds the coolness of the night. There is no sudden alarm or loud call, only the quiet internal shift from sleeping to not sleeping, a gradual awareness of the wooden ceiling beams above and the soft give of the futon beneath. You lie still for a time, letting the last threads of dream dissolve, feeling the simple weight of the cotton quilt across your legs and the way the silence settles around every small sound, the distant drip of water from a bamboo pipe, a single bird testing a note far off. Then you sit up slowly, folding the quilt aside with the same care you would use when handling thin paper, and place your feet on the smooth, worn floorboards that have been polished by years of footsteps just like this one. The room is small and spare, containing only the futon, a low wooden chest, a hanging scroll with a single character in dark ink, and a small alcove where a single branch of mountain cherry has been placed in a plain clay vase. You do not light a lamp because the darkness is familiar and your hands know the shape of every object they reach for. From the chest you take out a set of simple practice clothes, undyed cotton trousers and a jacket the color of unbleached linen, along with clean tabby socks and a narrow cloth belt. Dressing is a quiet sequence of small movements, sliding each arm into the sleeves, smoothing the fabric over your shoulders, wrapping the belt around your waist and tying it with a simple knot that sits just below the navel. You tug the jacket straight, feeling the fabric settle against your skin, and then roll up the futon and place it in the corner. The scroll and the cherry branch remain still, as if they too are waiting for the light. You move to the entrance alcove where your sandals wait, the woven straw still holding the shape of your feet from countless days, and slip them on. The wooden door slides open with a low, familiar rumble, and you step out into the world just as the sky begins to shift from deep blue to a softer grey, the stars fading one by one like embers cooling. The mountain air touches your face with a clean, cold freshness that carries the scent of cedar and damp earth, and you pause for a moment at the threshold to breathe it in, letting your lungs fill completely before releasing the breath in a slow, visible plume. The path begins right at your door, a narrow ribbon of packed earth and worn stone that winds upward through the forest and disappears into a bank of mist that clings to the middle slopes. You adjust the small carrying cloth that holds a bamboo-wrapped rice ball and a clay bottle of water, tuck it under your arm, and begin to walk. The first section of the path leads through a stand of tall Suji cedars whose trunks rise straight and dark on either side, their lower branches long ago trimmed away so that the eye travels upward to where their feathery crowns catch the earliest hint of light. The ground underfoot is springy with generations of fallen needles, muffling your footsteps until they become a soft, steady rhythm that seems to blend into the larger quiet, the only other sound being the occasional tap of a pine cone falling or the rustle of some small unseen creature in the underbrush. You walk with a pace that is neither hurried nor hesitant, a pace learned through years of traveling this same route, one that allows your breathing to deepen without strain while your heart beats slowly and evenly. The mist that you saw from the doorway now wraps around the trees ahead, softening their outlines and turning the path into a pale tunnel of grey and green, and you enter it without changing your stride. Inside the mist, the world becomes smaller and more intimate, distances obscured so that each tree emerges suddenly as a dark pillar, and then fades just as quickly behind, leaving you in a moving pocket of clear air bounded by shifting white. The moisture beads on your sleeves and on the fine hairs of your arms, cool but not unpleasant, and it carries with it the intensified smells of the forest, the sharpness of crushed pine needles, the earthy richness of moss, the faint sweetness of decaying wood. Sounds are altered here too. The bird calls from higher up the mountain arriving muffled and directionless. A single drop of collected water falling from a leaf onto a stone, sounding unexpectedly close. You keep your eyes on the path just ahead of your feet, noting the familiar landmarks in sequence. A flat grey stone with a crack that runs across its middle, a cedar root that crosses the path like a low step, a small wooden post marking the halfway point. and then the place where the ground levels out briefly and the mist begins to thin, revealing the pale glow of the sky above. After the mist, you enter a section of mixed forest where oaks and maples grow among the cedars, their leaves still dark green from the summer, but beginning to show the faintest hints of russet along the edges. Here the path runs alongside a low stone wall that someone built long ago, the stones now covered with a thick carpet of moss in shades of emerald and olive, each cushion of moss holding tiny droplets of dew that catch the growing light. The wall curves gently to the left and leads you to a place where the mountain stream crosses the path in a shallow channel lined with flat stepping stones. This is a place you always pause, not out of necessity, but out of a quiet habit of reverence, for the sound of the water is a constant low music that changes subtly with the seasons and the time of day. In the early morning the stream runs clear and cold over its bed of round pebbles, the surface broken into countless small ripples that reflect the pale grey sky and fragments of moving light. You step onto the first stone, then the next, feeling the solidity of each one under your sandals, the water flowing past just inches away with a soft gurgle and a whisper. Halfway across you crouch down and dip your hands into the stream, the shock of cold a sharp but welcome sensation that runs up your wrists and into your forearms. You bring a handful of water to your lips and drink, tasting the mineral cleanness of mountain rock, then splash a little onto your face, feeling the skin tighten and the last remnants of sleep wash away. For a moment you remain there in that crouch, watching the water flow endlessly past, a simple clarity that asks nothing and offers everything. From the stream the path begins to climb more steeply, a series of gentle switchbacks carved into the mountainside and held in place by more old stone walls. The cedars here grow closer together, their branches interlocking overhead to form a canopy that filters the increasing light into soft, moving patterns on the ground. Your breathing deepens naturally to match the incline. Each inhale timed with a step upward, each exhale a slow release that helps you stay centered. The muscles in your legs warm with the work, a pleasant steady warmth that spreads through your calves and thighs, and you notice how your body finds its own rhythm without conscious direction, arms swinging slightly, feet placing themselves in the precise spots that have been worn smooth by daily passage. On either side of the path, ferns unfurl their bright green fronds, still beaded with moisture, and small white flowers with 5 petals have opened to greet the morning, their faces turned in the general direction of the still hidden sun. The air is now noticeably lighter, the grey giving way to a soft gold that washes over the treetops and starts to seep downward like a slow tide, illuminating the trunks one by one in a gentle progression that you can watch in real time if you stop and look back down the slope. At the top of the switchbacks, the path straightens out onto a narrow ridge that offers the first open view of the valley below. You pause here, not because you are tired, but because the sight is one that deserves a moment of stillness. The mist that earlier surrounded you has now settled into the valley floor like a lake of white wool, completely obscuring the fields and villages that you know are there, leaving only the tops of a few tall trees and the distant dark shapes of the opposite mountains visible above the white, looking like islands in a silent sea. The sun has not yet crested the peaks to the east, but its approach is announced by a band of warm orange and pale pink that stretches along the horizon, tinting the mist with the softest hues. You stand with your feet planted on the firm earth of the ridge, your hands resting lightly at your sides, and you simply look, letting the vast quiet of the scene fill you without needing to name it or hold on to it. A light breeze moves across the ridge, carrying the sound of a distant temple bell so faint it might be memory, and then it passes, and the stillness returns. The path continues along the ridge for a short distance before descending slightly into a hollow that cups the mountain's shoulder like a hand. Here the trees open up and the ground levels into a small clearing, and there, nestled among the pines, is the dojo. It is a low wooden building with a gently sloping roof of thick cedar shingles, weathered to a silvery grey that blends seamlessly into the surrounding forest. A narrow wooden veranda runs along the front, raised a single step above the ground, and the large sliding door at the center is closed. 2 paper lanterns, unlit now, hang from the eaves, moving slightly in the barely perceptible breeze. A single pine tree grows close to the near corner, its lowest branch reaching out to almost touch the roof, and every so often a needle falls from that branch and slides down the shingles with a sound like a tiny brushstroke. The clearing around the dojo has been swept clean of debris, the earth packed smooth and hard, and along the edges grow low evergreen shrubs that someone has trimmed with careful attention. The morning light now reaches into this hollow with full strength, gilding the roof and the wooden walls with a honeyed glow, and the mist has retreated to the point where only a few lingering wisps float among the lower trunks of the pines. You cross the clearing with the same unhurried pace, your sandals making soft prints in the damp earth, and approach the sliding door. It is made of a lattice of thin wood covered with translucent paper, and through it you can see the dim outline of the interior, the shadow of the bow rack, the faint rectangular shape of the target mat. You place your hand on the wooden frame and push sideways, and the door moves smoothly along its groove with a low, resonant rumble that is one of the most familiar sounds in your life, a sound that signifies the beginning of the day's practice and the closing off of the outside world. You step inside and slide the door closed behind you, and the sound shuts off, leaving only the new and deeper quiet of the interior space. The dojo is a single large room, with a high ceiling supported by dark wooden beams that run from one side to the other. The floor is covered with tatami mats laid in a precise grid, their woven straw surface giving off a faint, dry, grassy scent that mingles with the smell of old cedar and a trace of camellia oil. The far wall has a row of wooden shutters that are currently closed, each one fitted perfectly into its frame, the slats holding back the morning light so that only thin lines of gold leak through, painting narrow stripes across the tatami. The bow rack stands against the left wall, a simple wooden stand holding a single long yumi, its curve elegant and still. Nearby, a quiver holding a bundle of arrows rests upright, the feathers at their ends forming a neat row of dark and light bands. In the corner, the straw target mat is rolled and tied with a cord, waiting to be unfurled. Near the entrance, a low shelf holds a folded cloth, a small ceramic pot of oil, and a clay jug filled with water, and beside it is a small alcove, just like the one in your room, this one holding a single white stone that has been placed on a wooden base. You remove your sandals at the entrance, and set them neatly to the side, aligning them with the edge of the step, and then step up onto the tatami, feeling the slight give of the woven straw under your tabi. The air inside the dojo is cooler than outside, still holding the night's chill, and it smells clean and empty, as if the space itself has been waiting in patient stillness for your return. You walk slowly across the room, your footsteps making only the softest whisper against the mats, and begin the simple preparations that start each day. You go first to the shutters, and, beginning with the one farthest to the left, you lift the wooden panel and slide it carefully to the side, allowing a rectangle of warm morning light to fall across the floor. Each shutter moves with the same low rumble as the door, and each opening brings in more of the outside world, the sight of pine branches, the sound of a distant bird, the feeling of fresh air beginning to circulate. You work your way across the wall, opening one shutter after another with slow, deliberate movements, until the entire wall is a series of bright openings framing the forest, and the dojo is filled with the soft, indirect light of early morning. The dust motes that have been invisible in the dimness now appear, floating in the slanting beams like tiny specks of gold, moving in slow, drifting currents as the air stirs with the opening of the room. You stand for a moment in the center of the space, surrounded by this gentle illumination, and you listen. There is the sound of a breeze moving through the pine outside, a soft shushing that rises and falls in no particular pattern, and the more distant sound of the stream, now far below, a continuous low note beneath everything else. A single insect begins to hum somewhere in the rafters, a thin metallic drone that is almost too faint to notice, and then it stops as if it too has settled into the quiet. The dojo is ready, and so are you. You walk to the shelf and take the folded cloth, a soft cotton square that has been washed many times until it is thin and supple. Unfolding it, you begin at the far corner of the room and wipe the tatami in slow, overlapping strokes, moving from the back wall toward the entrance. The cloth glides over the woven straw, picking up the faintest film of dust that has settled overnight, though there is almost nothing to remove, for the dojo is kept clean by a habit of continuous care. The motion of wiping is a soothing one, the long sweep of your arm and the shift of your weight from one foot to the other forming a kind of moving meditation that continues for as long as it takes to cover the entire floor. When you reach the front, you fold the cloth neatly and return it to the shelf, then walk to where the straw target mat rests against the wall. You untie the cord that holds it rolled, feeling the rough hemp texture against your fingers, and then you unroll it across the floor at the far end of the dojo, positioning it so that it sits exactly at the proper distance from the shooting line, a distance you could find with your eyes closed. The mat is thick and tightly wound, its face marked with concentric circles that have been nearly worn away by the repeated impact of arrows, the straw fibers poking out in places but overall still firm and serviceable. You smooth the edges with your palms, pressing them flat, and then stand back. Now you turn to the bow rack and look at the yumi resting there. It is a long bow, taller than you, made of bamboo strips laminated together with hard glue and bound at intervals with thin rattan wrappings that have darkened over time to a rich amber brown. The curve is asymmetrical, the upper limb longer than the lower in the traditional design, and the grip is wound with a fine cord that feels slightly tacky under the fingers. You reach out and lift it with both hands, cradling it as you would something both strong and fragile, feeling the perfect balance and the subtle tension of the string, which is made of hemp fibers twisted and waxed until they shine. The bow has no decoration beyond the natural grain of the bamboo and the pattern of the bindings, and its beauty lies entirely in its function, in the way it has been shaped by a craftsman who understood the wood and the purpose equally. You hold it for a moment, letting your hands remember its weight and its texture, and then you step onto the shooting line, facing the target mat across the length of the quiet, sunlit room. The first arrow of the day waiting in the quiver, the morning fully arrived, the world outside continuing on in its own slow rhythm, while you stand here, perfectly still, perfectly ready. You step up from the packed earth of the clearing onto the smooth wooden slat of the entrance, feeling the slight change in texture through the soles of your tabi, and you turn to face outward for a moment before entering fully. The morning light has grown stronger since you first arrived, and now it falls directly onto the front of the dojo, warming the cedar planks and drawing out the faint scent of old resin. A single small butterfly, pale yellow and unmarked, drifts across the veranda railing and disappears into the shadow beneath the eaves. You remove your sandals by slipping your heel out first, then using the toes of one foot to nudge the sandal off the other, a practiced economy of movement that ends with both sandals resting side by side on the stone step, the woven straw still holding the impression of your feet. You straighten them with a light touch, aligning their outer edges with the grain of the wood, and then step up into the dojo proper. The interior air greets you with a cool stillness that carries the memory of night, a stillness so complete that the sound of your own breathing seems amplified, each exhale a soft tide that recedes into the quiet. You stand just inside the doorway for a long, slow count, allowing your eyes to adjust from the bright outside to the dim grey taupe light that filters through the closed paper screens. The tatami mats stretch away in orderly rows, their pale green gold surface absorbing what little light there is and giving back only a subdued, restful glow. Against the far wall, the row of wooden shutters is sealed tight, each panel a rectangle of shadowed cedar framed by darker beams, their surfaces marked with the fine lines of grain that run vertically like a slow, silent rain. Above, the high ceiling beams cross one another in a grid of dark timber, and from one of them a single thin cord hangs down, ending in a small wooden hook that holds nothing at all. The space is empty, clean, waiting. You walk to the first shutter on the left, the one nearest the corner where the morning light would strike earliest, and place your fingertips on its lower edge. The wood is smooth and cool, slightly dusty with a fine, dry powder that clings to your skin. You lift upward just enough to free the panel from its lower groove, and then you slide it sideways along the track, a motion that requires a steady, even pressure, not force. The shutter glides with a low, resonant vibration that travels through your fingers and into the bones of your wrist, a sound that is part rumble, part whisper, and it ends with a soft thump as the panel meets its stop. Light that has been waiting just outside floods into the room in a single angled column, revealing a section of the tatami that a moment ago was invisible. In that column, the air comes alive with a slow dance of dust particles, each mote distinct and unhurried, some rising, some drifting sideways, all suspended in a pale gold medium that makes the space around them seem darker by comparison. You move to the next shutter, placing your feet one in front of the other with the same careful attention to the seam between mats, avoiding the cracks as a matter of long habit. The second shutter lifts with the same low note, slides along its track, and releases another block of light that overlaps the first, extending the illuminated area and bringing into view the grain of the wallboards, the small dark knot in one plank, the faint shadow of a bamboo leaf that has fallen onto the outside sill. As you proceed along the wall, opening each panel in turn, the room gradually fills with a soft, directionless radiance that seems to have no single source but emanates from the air itself. By the time you reach the fifth shutter, the light has become so general that the distinct columns have merged into a single wash of early gold, and the dust motes now float everywhere, not just in the beams but throughout the entire space, visible only when they pass through the brighter patches near the windows. You pause after opening the eighth and final shutter, resting your hands at your sides and simply looking at what the light has revealed. The dojo appears larger now, the far wall no longer a vague darkness but a clear surface of warm cedar, the bow rack standing out in crisp silhouette with its single long curve, the rolled target mat, a neat cylinder in the corner. Outside each window, the forest presents a different picture. Through the first, a close view of a pine trunk with rough bark and a single drop of resin glistening like amber. Through the third, a shaft of open air that goes down the mountainside and ends in a layer of cloud still resting in the valley. Through the sixth, a spray of thin bamboo that sways almost imperceptibly, each leaf catching the light on its edge. The window openings are squares of deep green and pale blue, framed by the dark wood, and the view from each is a still life that changes only when a bird passes or a branch dips under a breath of wind. You stand in the center of the floor now, exactly on the seam between the fourth and fifth tatami from the entrance, a spot you have occupied at this moment countless times. From here, you can feel the slight texture of the woven straw through your tabai, the alternating pattern of warp and weft that creates a barely perceptible grid, like the surface of a calm sea frozen in time. The air in the room has already begun to warm, and with the warmth comes a subtle shifting of scents, the dry grassiness of the tatami, the clean aroma of cedar, and now the fresher, greener smell of the forest outside, pine resin and damp earth, and something floral from the tiny white blossoms on the shrubs near the veranda. These scents layer one over another without competing, each finding its own level, and you breathe them in with a natural, unforced rhythm that matches the slow settling of the room into its daytime character. The dust that the morning light has revealed must now be cleared, not because it is dirty in any ordinary sense, but because the practice space should be as clean as the air after rain. You walk to the low shelf near the entrance, where a folded cotton cloth rests beside a clay water jug and a small ceramic pot that holds camellia oil. The cloth is pale grey from many washings, its edges slightly frayed, its surface soft and thin from years of use. You take it up and unfold it to its full square, then fold it once more into a smaller rectangle that fits comfortably in your palm. The shelf also holds a small wooden bucket, which you lift by its rope handle and carry to the jug, tipping the jug slowly so that a thin stream of water pours into the bucket with a gentle, trickling sound. The water is cool and clear, drawn from the mountain stream earlier in the week, and it carries no scent at all, just the pure, neutral freshness of stone-filtered snowmelt. You dip a corner of the cloth into the water and wring it out carefully, leaving it damp but not dripping, just cool enough to leave a faint trail on the tatami when you wipe. You begin in the far right corner, the one diagonally opposite the entrance, where the wall meets the floor in a clean line of dark wood. Bending from the waist, you place the damp cloth on the tatami, and begin to wipe in a long, even stroke that runs parallel to the wall, moving from the corner outward toward the center of the room. The cloth glides with a soft, hushing sound, and behind it the straw takes on a momentarily darker hue where the moisture touches, then fades back to its natural color within a few heartbeats. You work methodically, covering a section about the width of your shoulders, then shifting your feet sideways and beginning another stroke that overlaps the first by a finger's width, so that no part of the mat is missed. The motion settles into a slow rhythm. Reach forward, let the cloth travel the length of your arm, draw it back, step to the side, repeat. Your breathing aligns itself with this rhythm, inhaling as you extend, exhaling as you retract, and the rest of the world recedes to the edges of awareness, the bird calls and the wind, and the distant stream becoming a continuous background, like the sound of your own pulse. After completing the first row, you straighten up and take a step backward, aligning yourself with the next section of mat. The cloth is now less damp, and you pause to dip it again in the bucket, wringing it out as before, feeling the cool water against your knuckles. Then you resume, moving across the room in a slow progression that covers the entire floor, from the far wall all the way to the entrance area, the last strokes ending just where the raised step meets the tatami. When you finish, you stand and look back across the room, and the floor appears exactly as it did before, except now it holds a faint, even coolness and a slight sheen that will evaporate in a few minutes, leaving behind nothing but the knowledge that every part of the surface has been touched and cleaned. You carry the bucket back to the shelf, pour the remaining water into a small drain channel that runs along the outside of the building, and hang the cloth over a wooden peg to dry. The next task is the target mat, which waits against the wall in its rolled form, bound with a hemp cord tied in a simple knot. You kneel beside it and loosen the cord, feeling the rough fibers slide against your fingers, and then you set the cord aside on the shelf. The mat is heavy, made of tightly packed rice straw that has been compressed under great pressure, and when you tip it onto its side and begin to unroll it across the floor, you feel the weight of it resisting slightly, wanting to stay coiled. You unroll it slowly, guiding it with both hands, letting it flatten section by section until it lies across the tatami like a long, pale rectangle. The straw surface is marked with faded, concentric rings of dark ink, the central circle nearly worn away by hundreds of arrow strikes, and around the edges a few straw ends poke out where the binding has loosened slightly over time. You walk to each corner in turn and press down with your palms, smoothing the mat until it lies perfectly flat, its edges aligned with the lines of the tatami beneath. Now you stand at the shooting line, an invisible boundary that exists only in your knowledge, a line that crosses the room parallel to the far wall and a set number of tatami lengths from the target. You do not need to measure it with any tool, because your body knows the distance, the number of steps, the feel of the correct spot underfoot. All the same, you walk through the measurement as a way of greeting the space, taking calm, deliberate paces from the front edge of the target mat back toward the entrance. 1 pace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 paces, your feet landing in the center of each tatami in sequence, until you reach the point where the 8th step places you exactly in the middle of the mat, with an equal distance to either wall. You turn to face the target, and now the room arranges itself around you, the target ahead, the windows to your left, the bow rack to your right, the entrance behind, and above, the high ceiling with its grid of dark beams, the small wooden hook still empty. You walk to the bow rack and stand before it, looking at the long yumi that rests in its cradle. It is taller than you, made of 3 layers of bamboo that have been shaped and blued and bound with rattan cord at intervals along the limbs. The outer layer is a pale golden bamboo, the middle a darker shade, and the inner facing you is the color of rich, toasted grain. The string is currently relaxed, still attached at the lower nock, and it runs in a straight line from top to bottom, slightly off-center due to the bow's asymmetry. The hand grip is wrapped in a fine dark cord that has been worn smooth in the exact places where your palm and fingers rest, leaving a subtle pattern of lighter and darker areas that map your hold. Above and below the grip, the rattan bindings coil in tight, even spirals, each one overlapping the next by a hair's breadth, creating a texture that is both decorative and functional, holding the bamboo strips together against the immense forces of the draw. You reach out and lift the bow from its rack, using both hands, one at the grip and one at the upper limb, and you feel immediately the familiar weight, the perfect balance, the slight flex of the bamboo as it adjusts to being held. The bow is not heavy, but it is long and requires a certain awareness of its extension beyond your body, its upper tip rising well above your head, its lower tip dropping to just below your knee. You turn it slowly in your hands, examining every part of it, the way the bamboo grain runs in parallel lines like a slow river, the way the rattan bindings have darkened over the years, from pale tan to deep amber, the way the string wax has left a faint, pleasant smell of beeswax and resin. At the upper nock, a small sliver of ampler has been inlaid to protect the bamboo from the string's friction, and it gleams with a dull, creamy luster. At the lower nock, a similar piece of antler is slightly more worn, as it takes the bow's weight when it is stood on end. You check the string by running your thumb and forefinger along its length, feeling for any fraying or unevenness, but it is smooth and tightly twisted, recently waxed and in perfect condition. The tension, even when the bow is unstrung, gives the whole instrument a feeling of coiled energy, as if it were a living thing at rest. You hold the bow vertically before you for a moment, your left hand at the grip, your right hand resting lightly on the upper limb, and you close your eyes. In this position you can feel the subtle movements of the air in the room, the way the bow acts as an extension of your own senses, transmitting the faintest vibrations from the floor, from the building settling, from the distant echo of the stream. The string hums at the very edge of hearing, when a breath of wind finds its way through the open shutters, a note so high and soft it might be only in the mind. Then you lower the bow and rest its lower tip on the tatami, letting it stand beside you like a companion, your ham still curled loosely around the grip, and you open your eyes to the sight of the target mat waiting across the room. The morning light now fully settled and steady, the dust motes gone, the dojo clean and ready. Your gaze moves to the quiver standing beside the rack, a simple cylinder of lacquered wood containing a dozen arrows, their shafts straight and pale, their feathers a mix of dark brown and soft grey, taken from the wings of a mountain hawk and a heron respectively. You select one arrow and draw it out, feeling the shaft's lightness and the perfect smoothness of its surface, sanded to a finish that your fingers can barely feel. The point is a small leaf-shaped blade of polished steel, sharp enough to enter the straw mat cleanly, but not so sharp as to cut the fibers excessively. The nock of the rear end is a small slit cut into the bamboo, reinforced with a tiny wrapping of thread, and it fits the string with a precise, satisfying click that you will hear many times today. You place this first arrow on the shooting line, parallel to the edge of the tatami, and then you return to the bow, lifting it once more into the ready position. You are not yet ready to shoot, but you are ready to begin the next stage of the day, the slow, repetitive practice that will fill the hours ahead, and the dojo around you holds the silence and the light with a patience that matches your own. The preparations are complete, the space is prepared, and the mountain morning continues its quiet unfolding. The arrow rests on the tatami before you, a single straight shaft of pale bamboo lying exactly parallel to the seam between the mats, its point aimed toward the target, its feathered end facing you. You stand with the bow in your left hand, the lower tip lightly touching the floor, the upper limb rising past your shoulder, and you look down at the arrow as you might look at a familiar tool that still rewards careful attention. The bamboo shaft has been sanded smooth and rubbed with a light oil that gives it a faint, warm sheen, and the grain of the bamboo runs in fine, closely spaced lines from end to end, each one a ring of growth that was added in some distant grove on a southern slope. The feathers at the rear are 3 in number, set at equal intervals around the shaft and held in place with tiny wrappings of silk thread that your fingers have traced many times. The 2 darker feathers come from the wing of a mountain hawk, their barbs firm and slightly glossy, a deep brown that lightens to a russet edge. The 3rd feather is a soft grey-white from a heron, and it is a fraction softer than the others, bending with a gentle curve. All 3 have been trimmed to an identical shape, a long, narrow oval that tapers at each end, and the edges are smooth where the barbs have been lightly sanded to prevent them from catching the air unevenly. The nock at the very end is a simple slit cut into the bamboo, no wider than a grain of rice, and it has been reinforced with a tight wrapping of waxed thread that creates a small, raised collar. When the arrow sits on the string, that slit will grip the hemp with a precise, quiet click. You bend down and take up the arrow, lifting it with your right hand just behind the feathers, your thumb and forefinger holding it so lightly that the shaft barely registers the pressure. Standing straight again, you bring the arrow up before your eyes and sight along its length, turning it slowly to check for any warp or bend. The shaft is perfectly true, and as it rotates, the light from the open shutters slides along the grain like water flowing over a smooth stone. You examine the point next. The small leaf-shaped steel blade that is polished to a mirror gleam on both sides. It is sharp along its edges, but not excessively so, designed to enter the straw mat cleanly and hold there without cutting the fibers more than necessary. The point is fixed into a short tang that disappears into the bamboo, secured with a tight ring of dark thread, and there is no play or looseness anywhere. Satisfied, you lower the arrow to your side and turn your attention fully to the bow, which has been waiting upright in your left hand, as patient as a tree. You lift the bow and hold it before you, not yet in the shooting position, but simply cradling it with both hands at the grip, feeling its weight settle into your palms. The string runs in a vertical line, and you draw your right thumb across it lightly, feeling the waxed hemp fibers, the slight grittiness of the wax, the tight, springy resistance of the twist. The upper nock is a small notch carved into the antler tip, and the string sits firmly in it. You check it by pressing down with your thumb, and it does not move. The lower nock is similarly secure. You shift your left hand to the grip, wrapping your fingers around the dark core wrapping, and you position your hand so that the base of your thumb rests against the slight ridge where the rattan binding begins. The grip is not centered on the bow, but placed at the point of balance, about 1/3 up from the lower tip, and this asymmetry, once strange, now feels as natural as the shape of your own hand. Your right hand finds the string at the nocking point, a small section of thread wrapping that marks the correct spot, and you press the arrow's nock onto that exact place, the slit sliding over the string with a soft, precise click that you feel as much as hear, a tiny vibration that travels up the string and into your left hand. The arrow is now attached, held in place only by the grip of the nock on the string and by your right fingers, which rest lightly on either side of the shaft, not yet applying any drawing force. For a moment you remain in this intermediate position, the bow held loosely before you, the arrow pointing down at an angle toward the floor, its tip a bright spark of reflected light. You breathe in slowly, filling your lungs from the bottom up, feeling your diaphragm descend and your ribs expand outward. The air in the dojo is now fully warmed by the morning sun, and it carries the mingled scents of dry tatami, cedar wood, a trace of camellia oil, and the fresh green smell from the forest outside, a combination that is so familiar it barely registers except as a background of calm. As you exhale, you allow your shoulders to drop, feeling the space between your shoulder blades widen slightly, and you become aware of the floor beneath your feet, the firm, even support of the tatami, the way your weight is distributed equally between the balls of your feet and your heels, with a slight, natural inclination toward the balls. Now you begin the formal stance, the azhibumi, which means placing the feet. You slide your left foot outward to the left, moving it just far enough so that your feet are separated by approximately the width of your shoulders, measured not with a ruler, but with the internal sense of balance that years of practice have cultivated. Your toes point outward at a small angle, not straight ahead, and you settle your weight by bending your knees the slightest amount, just enough to unlock the joints and create a feeling of rootedness. The tatami supports you with a firm, slightly resilient surface that does not shift under your weight. You check your alignment by looking straight ahead at the target, and you notice that your hips are square to it, your shoulders level, your head balanced atop your spine like a stone on a column. No part of your body is tense, but no part is slack either. You hold a state of alert stillness, like a bow that is strung but not yet drawn. With your feet set, You move to the next phase, dosukuri, which is the settling of the torso. You straighten your spine without stiffening it, letting your tailbone drop slightly and your lower back relax. Your chest neither puffs out nor caves in, but remains open, and you feel your breathing become deeper and slower almost automatically, as if the body itself knows what this posture requires. Your arms hang from your shoulders without force, the left holding the bow loosely at your side, the right still resting on the string with the arrow nocked but pointing downward. You close your eyes for a long moment and listen to the sounds of the morning. A distant bird repeating a three-note call, the rustle of pine needles brushing against one another in a breeze, too light to feel, the continuous low murmur of the stream far below the ridge, and, from somewhere very close, perhaps just outside the nearest shutter, the delicate staccato tapping of a single pine needle that has fallen and is now sliding down the roof shingles, pausing, sliding again, each tap a tiny dry sound like a finger pull. When you open your eyes, the target mat sits in its accustomed place, its concentric circles a calm geometry against the darker wall. You raise the bow now in the movement called the chiokoshi. The motion begins in your left shoulder, which lifts smoothly, taking the bow with it, the lower tip leaving the floor and the upper limb rising toward the ceiling beams. Your right hand remains at the knocking point on the string, and the arrow, which until now has pointed downward, begins to tilt upward as the bow ascends. The entire action is one continuous, unhurried flow, and you observe it from within, as if you were both the mover and the witness. The bow rises until your left hand is above your head, the yumi now nearly vertical, its upper tip brushing the air near the dark crossbeam, its lower tip level with your waist. Your arms form a gentle curve not locked at the elbows, but extended with a soft, natural bend. The bow feels lighter in this raised position, as if it has become an extension of the upward motion, a mast catching an invisible wind. Your breathing pauses at the top of the raise, a natural suspension that occurs without command, and in that pause, the dojo seems to hold its breath with you. From the raised position you begin hikiwake, the drawing apart of the bow. Your left hand pushes forward and slightly downward, while your right hand pulls the string back, the two forces working in opposition to bend the bamboo limbs. The bow resists with a smooth, increasing pressure that you feel in the muscles of your left shoulder and back, in the grip of your right fingers, and along the length of your right arm. The string stretches, the limbs curve more deeply, and a low, resonant hum begins to emanate from the bow's core, a sound that is not loud, but is deeply present, like the note of a distant bell. The arrow, which has been riding on your right thumb, is now being drawn back as well, its point staying aligned with the target through the entire motion, never wavering left or right. Your arms spread apart with a steady slowness that makes the movement seem to last much longer than it actually does, each increment of the draw a world unto itself. At the halfway point of the draw, your right hand is near your ear, your elbow is high, and the bow has assumed its full working curve, the upper limb bending more than the lower, the asymmetry of the design now fully expressed. The pressure against your left hand is firm and constant, and you feel the bow's energy, stored in the compressed bamboo fibers, as a living tension that asks for nothing but your attention. You continue the draw into the stage called kai, the full meeting of forces. This is the moment of complete extension, when the arrow point has been drawn back past the bow's front edge, and your right hand rests just behind your jaw, the string touching your collarbone and your chest. Your body forms a cross shape, the bow horizontal across your chest, the arrow a straight line from your right shoulder to the target. In this position, every part of you is aligned, your feet, your hips, your shoulders, your arms, the bow, the arrow, and the target, all exist in a single plane, a perfect symmetry that took years to learn and a lifetime to appreciate. The draw weight of the bow, which is considerable, is now borne not by muscle alone, but by the structure of your skeleton, the push of your left arm balanced against the pull of your right, your back muscles holding the expansion with a deep, quiet strength. Your breathing has stopped. You are at the peak of the inhale, and your body is filled with a stillness that is not rigid, but full of potential, like the surface of a lake just before a single drop touches it. From outside, The pine needle that has been tapping the roof gives one last, small click and then is silent. You hold. The hold extends for a length of time that cannot be measured in seconds because it exists outside of ordinary time. It is a space of pure awareness in which you are conscious of every detail simultaneously, the coolness of the air on your cheek, the faint tickle of a loose thread from your jacket against your wrist, the golden mote of dust that has drifted into the shaft of light and now hangs motionless at eye level, the distant blue shape of the far mountain through the sixth shutter, the smell of warm straw and oiled wood, and the deep, resonant hum of the bow that you can feel in your teeth and in the bones of your skull. The arrow is not something you are aiming. It is simply an extension of your gaze, which rests on the center of the target with no more effort than it takes to look at a cloud. You are not waiting for anything, not anticipating anything, not hoping for a perfect shot. You are simply present, holding the full draw as naturally as a branch holds a fruit. The release, hanare, comes not as a decision, but as a loosening. Your right fingers, which have been wrapped around the string with a specific, learned grip, simply relax. There is no plucking, no snapping of the hand away. The string escapes from the fingers as if it had been held only by a wish. The bow speaks. The string snaps forward with a deep, ringing thrum that fills the dojo from floor to ceiling, a sound that has a beginning and a middle and a long, slow decay, fading into the corners where the walls meet and then into the wood itself. The arrow is gone from your awareness in the same instant, launched with a speed that the eye cannot follow, and your body remains in the extended position, your left arm still pushing, your right hand now open and relaxed near your ear, your gaze still resting on the target. The bow vibrates in your left hand, a series of diminishing oscillations that travel up your arm and into your shoulder, a rhythmic shudder that feels like the bow's own heartbeat as it releases the energy it held so briefly. Across the room, the arrow strikes the straw target. The sound is a low, solid thump, not sharp or loud, but deep and satisfying, the sound of a heavy raindrop hitting packed earth. The arrow buries its point into the mat and comes to rest, the shaft protruding at a slight angle, the feathers still for a moment and then quivering as the impact's vibration travels back up the shaft and dissipates into the air. You remain exactly where you are, your arms still extended, your body still facing the target, your eyes still looking at the spot where the arrow now stands. This is zanshin, the lingering form, the continuation of the shot after the shot is over. In this posture, you allow the experience of the release to run through you completely, feeling the small tremors in your muscles, the return of your pulse to a slower beat, the way your breathing resumes naturally. First, a shallow exhale, then a deeper inhale that fills the space your held breath has left. The bow slowly stills in your hand, the last vibrations fading until it is as quiet and motionless as a branch on a windless day. A long moment passes, perhaps half a minute, perhaps more, in which you do nothing at all but stand and observe. You observe the arrow in the target, noting that it is grouped within the central circle, slightly high and to the right, a placement that tells you something about the way your hand released today, the slight tension in your shoulder, the angle of your head. You observe the quality of the light, which has now brightened another shade, the sun having climbed above the treetops and pouring its full morning gold through the open shutters, casting long rectangles of warmth across the tatami and illuminating the dust that has begun to float again in the disturbed air. You observe the quiet of the dojo after the sound of the shot, a silence that is deeper than before because it follows a sound, and you can hear in it the return of the small distant bird calls, the trickle of the stream, the breeze that has picked up slightly and now moves through the pine with a long, soft sigh. You observe your own body, the pleasant warmth in your shoulders and back, the slight stretch in the muscles that have just worked, the calm satisfaction that comes not from success, but from the complete absorption in the act itself. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, you lower your left arm, letting the bow tip come to rest once more on the tatami, and you bring your right hand down to your side. You exhale fully, a long, soft release of air that you did not know you were holding, and you turn your head slightly to look at the quiver where the next arrow waits. Its feathers a patient arrangement of brown and grey, its shaft as straight as the one that now stands in the straw. The first arrow still stands in the straw mat, its shaft rising at a slight angle, the grey and brown feathers motionless now that the impact vibrations have fully died away. You lower the bow until its tip rests on the tatami, and you stand for a while simply breathing, letting the rhythm of your body return to its resting pace, the way a pond settles after a stone has passed through its surface. The shot you just made is already a completed event, neither good nor bad, simply finished, and as you exhale through your nose you feel the subtle release of a tension you had not noticed holding, a small tightness in the back of your jaw that now softens and spreads into warmth. The dojo around you remains quiet, the light steady, the forest sounds continuing their patient backdrop, and after a full minute of this simple standing, you are ready to begin again. You turn your head toward the quiver and look at the arrows waiting there, their shafts rising in a neat row from the lacquered wooden cylinder, each one identical in length and thickness, each one a potential flight across the room. You walk the few steps to the quiver, feeling the tatami give slightly under your weight, and you select the next arrow by its shaft, drawing it upward with the same light grip behind the feathers. This one has the same arrangement of hawk and heron feathers, the same leaf-shaped steel point, the same tiny wrapping of silk at the nock. You turn it once between your fingers and find it as true as the first, then carry it back to the shooting line, where you stand in the exact spot your feet occupied before, finding it not by looking, but by the feel of the mat's woven pattern under your soles, a familiar grid that guides you into place. The sequence begins again with the feet, the asibumi that roots you to the floor. You slide your left foot outward and settle into the stance, and this time you notice something slightly different. The morning sun has shifted just enough that a warm bar of light now falls across your right shoulder, a gentle heat that you can feel through the cotton of your jacket. The light brings with it a heightened awareness of the air's temperature, the contrast between the sun-warmed fabric on one side of your body and the cooler shadow on the other. You register this without judgment, letting it become part of the moment, and then you lift the bow, knock the arrow with that soft, precise click, and raise the yumi overhead in the smooth, continuous motion of uchiokoshi. The draw begins, your left hand pushing, your right pulling back, the bow bending into its working curve with a low resonant hum that fills the space between your ears and the rafters. At full draw at kai you find the stillness again, that suspended moment where breath stops and the world reduces to a single point of focus, the arrow point aligned with the target's worn center. Then the release, the loosening of your right fingers, the string snapping forward with its deep thrum, the arrow arcing invisibly across the room, and the solid, low thump of the point entering straw. You remain in sanshin, the extended posture, feeling the bow's vibrations fade through your left hand, watching the arrow that now stands beside the first one, grouped within the central circle, but slightly lower and to the left, a small adjustment your body made without conscious instruction. This is how the morning practice unfolds, a cycle that repeats with variations so subtle they are almost beyond noticing, each shot a complete world that rises, holds, and passes, like waves arriving on a shore. You do not count the arrows as you shoot them, but your body keeps its own tally, a gradual accumulation of small sensations in your shoulder blades, a warmth that spreads through the muscles of your upper back, a growing familiarity between your palm and the grip of the bow. After the second arrow, you retrieve both from the target, walking across the tatami with the same measured pace you use for everything here, and you pull each arrow from the straw with a straight, steady pull, not twisting or bending the shaft. The straw grips the points firmly and releases them with a small, dry rustle, and you examine each arrow briefly, checking that the feathers are still aligned and the points still sharp, before returning them to the quiver. Then you walk back to the line, reset your stance, and begin again. The third arrow follows the same path as the first two, but during its flight you notice a subtle change in the light outside. A thin cloud has passed over the sun, not a large or dark cloud, but a wisp of high vapor that softens the shadows and dims the gold rectangles on the tatami to a gentler shade of ivory. The room becomes cooler by a degree, and the dust motes which had been blazing in the direct beams now fade to near invisibility, their dance continuing unseen except where the light still finds the edges of their tiny forms. The bird that had been calling its three-note song from somewhere near the ridge has fallen silent, and in its place a different bird further away offers a longer, descending call of 5 notes that sounds like water dropping into a deep well. These small shifts in the environment enter your awareness without disrupting it, becoming part of the texture of the practice, a background that supports rather than distracts. With the 4th arrow, you become aware of your breathing in a more direct way. You notice that you have fallen into a pattern without intending to, a rhythm that matches each phase of the shot to a phase of the breath. As you settle into the stance, you inhale slowly through your nose, drawing the air deep into your belly over a count of 4 steady heartbeats. As you raise the bow, you hold that breath lightly, not clamping down, but simply pausing at the top of the inhale, and during the draw, your lungs remain full, the expansion of your chest mirroring the expansion of the bow. At the moment of kai, the full draw, your breath is suspended entirely, and the stillness of your body and the stillness of the air in your lungs become one single stillness, a quiet so complete that you can hear the faint, high ringing of your own attention. Then the release comes, and with it the exhale, a slow, controlled outflow of air that continues through the arrow's flight and into the zanshin, the lingering presence. After the arrow strikes, you allow your breathing to return to its natural, unregulated rhythm, taking one deep breath and then another, feeling the oxygen move through your blood and into the muscles that have worked. This pattern, you realize, has established itself without your conscious design, emerging from the practice like a path that appears in a field after many walkings. The 5th arrow brings a subtle variation in the draw. As you pull the string back, you feel a slight difference in the resistance, a tiny increase in tension that might be due to the bow warming in the morning air, the bamboo fibers expanding just enough to alter the feel. Or it might be that your own muscles are warming, the first faint edge of fatigue lending a new quality to the pull, a slight tremor in your right shoulder that is not weakness, but simply the body's honest report of its condition. You adjust without thinking, engaging the muscles between your shoulder blades a fraction more, and the draw completes smoothly, the tremor disappearing as the full draw locks your skeleton into its alignment. The shot flies true, and as you stand in zanshin, you feel the tremor return as a faint quiver in your extended arm, a reminder that you are flesh and bone, and not only intention, and this too is part of the practice, the acceptance of the body's reality, alongside the mind's clarity. Between the 5th and 6th arrows you pause longer than usual. You lower the bow and walk to the open shutters, standing before the middle window and looking out at the forest that slopes away from the dojo. The thin cloud has passed and the sun is bright again, making the pine needles glisten where the earlier mist has left a fine coating of moisture. The bamboo grove to the left of the building sways in a breeze that you cannot feel on your face, but can see in the way the slender green culms bend and recover, their long leaves brushing against one another with a sound like very distant rain, a dry, rustling whisper that rises and falls in no discernible pattern. A single large bird, a raven perhaps, soars high above the valley, its wings outstretched and motionless, riding a thermal that carries it in slow, tilting circles. You watch it for a long moment, feeling the coolness of the air near the window on your skin, and then you turn back to the dojo, refreshed by the brief change of focus. The 6th arrow begins with a conscious return to the fundamentals. You check your feet placement, finding that your left foot has drifted slightly inward during the pause, and you correct it with a small, precise adjustment. You settle your hips, feeling your tailbone drop and your lower back lengthen. You roll your shoulders once, gently, to release any accumulated tightness, and then you lift the bow with a renewed attention to the smoothness of the motion, the way your left arm rises, not as a separate part, but as an extension of your entire body's upward intention. The draw feels cleaner this time, the slight tremor of the 5th arrow having dissipated with the rest, and at full draw you experience a moment of perfect clarity, The target, the arrow, your body, and your attention all occupying the same point in space, a convergence that is fleeting but complete. The release happens almost by itself, your fingers loosening with an ease that surprises you, and the arrow flies with a particularly low, resonant hum from the string, a note that seems to hang in the air a split second longer than usual before the thump of impact confirms the shot's completion. You stand in the aftermath, and you notice that your heart is beating slowly and steadily. Your breath is deep and even, and a feeling of quiet contentment has settled over you like a light blanket, warm and weightless. After the sixth arrow, you retrieve all of them from the target once more, pulling each one with care, examining the feathers and the points, and returning them to the quiver. The target mat now shows 6 small holes clustered within the central circle, and you take a moment to smooth the straw around each hole with your thumb, pressing the disturbed fibers back into place so that the mat will continue to serve for many more arrows. The morning has advanced while you have been practicing. The light that enters the dojo is now higher and whiter, less golden than it was at dawn, and the shadows have shortened and sharpened. The air has warmed enough that you no longer feel any coolness on your skin, and a single bead of sweat has formed at your temple, a small round drop that catches the light before you wipe it away with the back of your hand. You take up the clay jug from the shelf and pour a small amount of water into the cup, drinking it slowly, feeling the cool liquid travel down your throat and into your stomach, a simple pleasure that refreshes without distracting. You return to the shooting line and select the 7th arrow. The repetition of the practice has now built a kind of momentum, not a hurried one, but a deep, steady current that carries you from one shot to the next, without the need for decision or will. Your body knows the sequence, and your mind, rather than directing, has become an observer, watching the body perform with a calm, detached interest. The stance, the knocking, the raise, the draw, the hold, the release, the zanshin. Each phase flows into the next like water flowing over a series of gentle steps, and you are no longer doing the practice so much as you are the practice doing itself, through you. The 7th arrow flies, strikes, and stands in the mat alongside its companions, and you hardly notice the sound of the string or the thump of the impact. So absorbed have you become in the continuous flow. The 8th arrow teaches you something about the wind. Just as you reach full draw, a breeze that has been playing in the bamboo grove decides to slick through the open shutters and enter the dojo directly. A light, cool current that touches your face and neck and makes the feathers on the arrow quiver. You feel it, but you do not react. Your hold remains steady, and when you release, the arrow compensates naturally, its feathers catching the moving air and adjusting the flight by a tiny margin. The strike is still within the central circle, though a fraction further to the left, and you note this small lesson about the interaction between arrow and wind, filing it away in the deep library of bodily knowledge that no book could contain. The breeze dies away as quickly as it came, leaving the dojo still once more, and you continue. By the 12th arrow, the warmth in your muscles has deepened to a pleasant, steady heat, and you can feel the full range of motion in your shoulders with a clarity that only comes after many repetitions. Your left arm pushes the bow away with a smooth, unwavering strength, and your right arm draws the string back along a path that has been grooved by thousands of prior draws, each one a tiny refinement on the one before. The bow's hum has become as familiar as your own breathing, a constant low voice that speaks only of tension and release, and the arrows group ever more tightly in the target center, not because you were trying harder, but because you were trying less, allowing the natural alignment of your body and the bow to produce the result that they were designed to produce. You have entered a state that might be called calm focus, or might simply be called presence, a condition in which past and future have receded, and only this arrow, this draw, this breath, this moment exists. In that state, the sound of the pine needles skittering across the roof, the distant call of the 5-note bird, the subtle creak of a wooden beam expanding in the sun's warmth, all are equally part of the practice. All are equally welcome, and none disturbs the deep quiet that has settled not just over the dojo, but within you as well. The 12th arrow has been retrieved, examined, and returned to the quiver, its point still sharp, its feathers still smooth and evenly spaced, and now you stand at the center of the dojo with the bow resting on its tip beside you, and a particular quality of stillness settling into your limbs. It is not fatigue, not exactly, but a gentle signal from the body that the morning's work has been sufficient, that a pause would be welcome, that the sun has climbed high enough to change the character of the day. You walk to the bow rack and place the yumi carefully in its cradle, feeling the wood of the grip still worn from your hand. And then you step toward the entrance, where your sandals wait in their neat alignment on the stone step. Sliding open the door brings a change of air against your face, a freshness that the dojo, for all its open shutters, has been holding back. The outside world greets you with a soft wash of breeze that carries the full scent of the mountain at midday, warm pine resin, sun-heated earth, the faint sweetness of those small white flowers whose name you have never needed to know. You step out onto the wooden veranda and slide the door closed behind you with a single smooth motion, the rumble of its track a final note before the quiet of the open air takes over. The veranda boards are warm under your tabi, the cedar having absorbed the morning sun until it holds a gentle, diffused heat that rises through the soles of your feet and into your ankles, a pleasant sensation after the cooler tatami of the practice floor. You turn to face the valley, and the view that opens before you is the same one you glimpsed through the shutters during practice, but now it surrounds you completely, unframed by wooden squares, extending from the ridge on your left all the way around to the shoulder of the mountain on your right. The mist that had pooled in the valley at dawn has entirely dissolved, leaving the air so clear that you can see individual trees on the far slopes, their shapes distinct against the deeper green of the forest, and beyond them, layer upon layer of blue-grey mountains receding into the distance, until the final ridge is only a faint smudge that might be cloud or might be stone. The sky above is a pale, washed blue, the color of old indigo cloth that has been rinsed many times, and across it a single cloud drifts with the slow dignity of a boat on a windless lake, its shadow traveling across the valley floor below, darkening a patch of forest, then a patch of meadow, then a patch of the winding river that flashes silver before the shadow moves on. A low wooden bench sits against the wall of the dojo, placed exactly where the roof overhang provides shade during the middle of the day. You walk to it and sit down, feeling the bench take your weight with a small, familiar creak, the sound of old wood greeting an old friend. The bench has been worn smooth by years of use, its surface a pale grey that matches the silvery shingles overhead, and it is just long enough to sit comfortably with your hands resting on your knees and your back straight, but not stiff. From this position you can see the path that you walked earlier in the morning, winding down through the pines until it disappears into the darker green of the lower forest, and you can also see the roof of your small dwelling far below, a tiny patch of grey-brown among the trees, barely visible unless you know exactly where to look. You reach for the clay jug that you brought out with you, a small round-bodied vessel with a narrow neck and a simple cork stopper. The clay is unglazed, rough and cool against your palm, and when you pull the cork it comes free with a soft pop that seems loud in the mountain quiet. You pour water into the small cup that nests on top of the jug, a thin stream that catches the sunlight and sparkles for an instant before filling the cup to its brim. The water is still cool from having been drawn at dawn and kept in the shade of the dojo, and when you lift the cup to your lips and drink, the coldness spreads across your tongue and down your throat in a wave that you can follow all the way to your stomach. You drink the entire cup slowly, in small sips, feeling each swallow ease a dryness you had not noticed, and then you pour a second cup and drink that too, this time even more slowly, letting the water rest in your mouth for a moment before swallowing, tasting the faint mineral quality, the clean memory of the mountain stream from which it came. Beside the jug, you have placed the carrying cloth that you brought from your dwelling, and inside it, wrapped in a dried bamboo leaf, is a simple rice ball. You untie the cloth and lift out the bundle, the bamboo leaf crackling softly as you unfold it to reveal the rice within, a neat sphere of white grains pressed together just firmly enough to hold their shape. The rice is still slightly warm from having been cooked early in the morning, and it gives off a faint, sweet steam that mingles with the pine-scented air. A single pickled plum, small and red and wrinkled, has been pressed into the center of the rice ball, and around it a few dark specks of toasted sesame seed cling to the grains, adding a subtle nuttiness to the aroma. You hold the rice ball in both hands, feeling its warmth and its simple, honest weight, and then you take a bite, a small one, chewing slowly and deliberately. The taste of the rice is mild and clean, the grain soft but distinct, each one yielding between your teeth before releasing its subtle sweetness. The pickled plum provides a sharp, salty contrast that wakes up the corners of your mouth, and the sesame seeds add a tiny crunch that surprises you with each bite. You eat the rice ball in unhurried mouthfuls, pausing between each one to look out at the valley, to breathe the warm air, to feel the gentle breeze that comes and goes, lifting the hair at your temples and then setting it down again. A single grain of rice falls onto your knee and you pick it up with your fingertips and eat it, a small gesture of care that has become automatic over the years. When the rice ball is finished, you fold the bamboo leaf neatly and place it back in the carrying cloth, and then you sit with your empty hands resting on your thighs, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a simple meal in the middle of a simple day. The veranda has become a small world of its own, a stage from which you can observe the larger world without needing to participate in it. A small brown bird, the same one perhaps that you heard calling earlier, lands on the railing at the far end of the veranda, its claws making tiny clicking sounds on the weathered wood. It is a sparrow-like creature with a neat round body and quick, jerky movements, its head turning from side to side as it surveys its surroundings with bright black eyes. It does not seem to notice you, or if it does, it does not care. You are simply another part of the veranda, a still and silent feature of the landscape. The bird tilts its head and ruffles its feathers, sending a small puff of dust into the sunlight, and then it begins to preen, drawing each wing feather through its beak with a delicate, precise motion that speaks of deep, instinctive contentment. You watch it without moving, your breathing slow and shallow so as not to disturb it, and for a long time the only sounds are the soft rustle of the bird's preening and the distant, constant murmur of the stream. Then, with a sudden flutter that makes the railing vibrate, the bird launches itself into the air and disappears into the pine branches, leaving behind only the memory of its presence and one small grey feather that drifts down to rest on the veranda boards. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky, and the shadow of the roof overhang advances inch by inch across the veranda floor. You notice that a particular knot in the floorboard, a dark oval that has always reminded you of a closed eye, is now touched by the edge of the sunlight, which means that the sun has passed its zenith and is beginning its descent, and that the time for resuming practice is approaching. But you do not rise yet. The pause is still unfolding and there is no hurry. You pour another half cup of water and drink it, and then you lean back slightly, resting your shoulders against the warm wall of the dojo, and you allow your eyes to close. Behind your closed eyelids, the world does not disappear, but transforms. The warm red darkness is alive with the after-images of the bright valley, shifting shapes of gold and green that float and merge and fade. The sounds of the mountain become more distinct when vision is set aside. The rustle of pine needles is a layered whisper with a high dry top note and a lower, softer undertone. The stream is a continuous low rumble, punctuated by the occasional gurgle of water passing around a particular stone. The breeze is a rhythmic rise and fall, like the breathing of some vast, patient creature. From somewhere far down the mountain, so faint that it might be imagination, comes the sound of a single bell, perhaps from a small village temple, a single deep note that hangs in the air for a long moment and then melts back into the quiet. You sit with these sounds, letting them wash over you without naming or analyzing them, and you feel your heartbeat slow to match the unhurried pace of the afternoon. When you open your eyes again, the world seems fresh and slightly altered, as if the moment of closed-eyed listening has washed the dust from your perceptions. The colors are a shade deeper, the greens more varied than you remembered, the blue of the sky more luminous. The single cloud has drifted further east and now hangs over the far ridge, its shape changed from a boat to a long, thin streak, like a brushstroke of white ink. The small grey feather still rests on the veranda where the bird left it, and you lean forward and pick it up, feeling its softness and its almost weightless quality, then place it on the railing where the breeze might carry it away to some new destination. You stretch your arms overhead, a long, slow stretch that pulls at the muscles of your shoulders and back, the same muscles that have been working all morning, and you feel them respond with a pleasant ache, a reminder of the practice behind you and the practice still to come. The sun touches the dark oval knot in the floorboard fully now, and you know that the midday pause is drawing to its natural close. You gather the water jug and the carrying cloth, rise from the bench with the same unhurried movement that has characterized every action of this day, and walk along the veranda to the sliding door. Before entering, you turn and look once more at the valley, at the layers of mountains, and the silver thread of the river, and the endless, patient sky, and you carry the image with you as you slide the door open and step back into the cool, dim interior of the dojo. The bow rests in its rack, the arrows stand in their quiver, the target mat waits with its worn concentric circles, and the afternoon practice is about to begin, slow and calm and inevitable as the turning of the earth. The door slides closed behind you with that low, familiar rumble, sealing the dojo into its own quiet world once more. The interior air feels cooler than the veranda, but only slightly, the open shutters having allowed the morning warmth to penetrate and settle into the wooden walls and the straw mats. The target still stands at the far end of the room, its surface marked by the morning's arrows, those 12 small punctures clustered around the worn center like stars around a faded moon. The bow rests in its rack, the string relaxed, the bamboo limbs having cooled in your absence, and the quiver holds the remaining arrows, their feathers a silent arrangement of dark and pale. You walk across the tatami with the same measured stride you have used all day, each step falling exactly in the center of a mat, and you take your place on the shooting line, that invisible boundary that exists only in the memory of your body. But before you pick up the bow, before you select an arrow, you pause and you allow yourself to consider the full shape of what you are doing, not as a task to complete, but as a form to inhabit. The practice of kyudo is not simply the shooting of arrows into a target. It is a sequence of 8 distinct stages, each one containing its own purpose and its own quality of attention, each one flowing into the next like the characters of a word written in ink. You have moved through these stages many times today already, but now, in the quiet of the afternoon, with the sun beginning its slow descent, and your body warm and awake from the midday pause, you decide to revisit each stage with a more deliberate awareness, to walk through the form as if for the first time, noticing every detail that familiarity has begun to soften. The first stage is asibumi, the placing of the feet. You stand with your heels together and your toes pointing outward at a slight angle, the same posture in which you have begun every shot today. But now you bring your full attention to the soles of your feet, feeling the firm, woven surface of the tatami through the thin cotton of your tabi. The mat is slightly warm, having absorbed the morning sun, and it yields just perceptibly under your weight, a resilience that is neither hard nor soft, but exactly between. You slide your left foot outward, moving it along the seam between 2 mats, and you feel the texture of the straw strands beneath your sole, a fine, regular grid of warp and weft that guides your foot into place. The distance between your feet is the width of your shoulders, a measure determined not by any external ruler, but by the feeling of stability that settles into your hips when the stance is correct. Your weight distributes itself evenly between both feet, with a slight inclination toward the balls, and your knees unlock with the tiniest bend, just enough to create a feeling of rootedness without tension. You stand in this stance for a full minute, simply breathing, feeling the way the floor supports you, the way your ankles adjust to small shifts in balance, the way your spine rises naturally from the foundation of your feet. The asibumi is not a position to be achieved and forgotten, but a living connection to the earth that continues throughout the entire shot. The second stage is dozukuri, the settling of the body. From the stability of your feet, you turn your attention upward, checking the alignment of your hips, your spine, your shoulders, and your head. You feel your tailbone drop slightly, a subtle motion that releases a tension in your lower back you had not consciously noticed. Your pelvis tilts just enough to allow your spine to rise straight and easy, each vertebrae resting on the one below like stones in a wall that has stood for centuries. Your shoulders loosen and fall back, not pulled or forced, but simply allowed to find their natural resting place, and you feel your chest open, your collarbones widening. Your head balances on top of your spine, your chin neither lifted nor tucked, your gaze soft and level, directed toward the target but not fixed on it with any strain. Your arms hang at your sides without stiffness, the left hand resting against your thigh, the right hand loose and empty. You take a breath and let it out, and as you exhale you feel the dozukuri deepen, the settling becoming not just a physical arrangement, but a quality of presence, a calm alertness that fills your entire body from the soles of your feet to the crown of your head. The third stage is yugame, the readying of the bow. You turn your head toward the bow rack, and you walk the few steps to it, your feet maintaining the awareness of the ground that Azibumi established. You lift the bow from its cradle with both hands, feeling once more the familiar weight and balance, the smooth curve of the bamboo, the slight tackiness of the grit cord against your palm. You return to the shooting line and stand with the bow held before you, its lower tip resting on the tatami, its upper limb rising past your shoulder. Then you reach for an arrow, selecting it from the quiver with a light grip behind the feathers, and you bring it to the string. The nock finds its place with that quiet click, and you hold the arrow between the first and second fingers of your right hand, resting it on your thumb. Not yet drawing, but simply holding, establishing the relationship between your hand and the shaft and the string. Your left hand adjusts on the grip, finding the exact placement where the base of your thumb aligns with the ridge of the rattan binding, your fingers wrapping around the bow with a firmness that is neither tight nor loose. You breathe once, deeply, and you feel the yugame complete itself, the bow and the arrow and your body now a single system, ready to move. The fourth stage is uchokoshi, the raising of the bow. This motion begins in your left shoulder, which lifts smoothly, taking the bow with it, the lower tip leaving the tatami and the upper limb ascending toward the ceiling beams. Your right hand remains at the knocking point on the string, and the arrow, which has been pointing downward, begins its long tilt upward as the bow rises. The movement is one continuous flow, and you observe its details with a gentle, inclusive attention. The way your left arm extends but does not lock, the way your right elbow rises outward from your side, the way the bow feels lighter as it climbs, as if the air itself were helping to lift it. The bow reaches its apex when your left hand is above your head and the yumi is nearly vertical, its curve a graceful arc against the dark beams of the ceiling. Your arms form a gentle circle, and your face is framed between them, your eyes looking through the space where the string will soon be drawn. At the top of the raise, your breath pauses naturally, a brief suspension that marks the transition from preparation to action, and in that pause you feel the whole dojo holding still with you. The dust mote suspended, the pine needles silent on the roof. The fifth stage is hikiwake, the drawing of the bow. This is the action that gives kyudo its distinctive shape, the simultaneous pushing forward of the left arm and pulling back of the right, the two forces working in equal opposition to bend the bamboo limbs. You begin the draw by allowing your left shoulder to settle downward and forward, your left arm extending as if you were pushing against a distant wall. At the same time, your right elbow draws back and upward, describing a smooth arc through the air, your right forearm remaining relaxed, your fingers holding the string with a light but secure grip. The bow responds immediately, its limbs bending into their working curve, the upper limb flexing more than the lower in the characteristic asymmetry of the yumi. The resistance increases steadily, a smooth, progressive tension that you feel in the muscles of your back, between your shoulder blades and along the length of your left arm. The arrow point remains aligned with the target throughout the entire draw, never deviating as if it were sliding along an invisible rail. Your breathing, which paused at the top of uchokoshi, remains suspended, your lungs full but not strained, and your body moves with a slow, deliberate grace that turns the draw into a kind of slow-motion flight, the arrow traveling backward while your intention travels forward. Halfway through the draw, your right hand passes your ear and you feel the string brush against your chest. The bow's hum has begun, a low, resonant vibration that you can feel in your left hand, and here is a deep, almost sub-audible note, like the sound of a distant gong struck once and allowed to sing. Your right elbow is now level with your shoulder, pointing directly behind you, and your left arm is fully extended, the bow now at its maximum bend. The energy stored in the bamboo limbs is enormous, a coiled power that you hold and balance, neither resisting it nor giving in to it, simply containing it as a vessel contains water. The draw continues until your right hand reaches the point just behind your jaw, and then, with a final minute adjustment, you arrive at the sixth stage. The sixth stage is Kai, the meeting, the full draw. This is the central moment of kyudo, the still point around which all the other stages revolve. At Kai, your body has become a perfect cross, your left arm extended horizontally, your right arm drawn back with the elbow high, your chest open, your spine straight, your feet rooted. The bow is a curve of compressed energy, the string is a straight line of tension, and the arrow is a straight line of intention, all intersecting at the point where your right hand meets your jaw. Your breathing is suspended, your body is motionless, and your mind is empty of thought but full of awareness. You see the target, but you are not aiming. You are simply aligned, and the alignment itself is the aim. You feel the cool air on your face, the warmth of the sun on your shoulder, the texture of the grip under your left hand, the slight pressure of the string against your collarbone, the beat of your heart, slow and steady. Time stretches, not in a way that can be measured, but in a way that can be felt, each second expanding to contain an infinity of detail, each detail a complete world. You could remain in Kai forever, and in some sense you do, because this moment, once experienced, never fully leaves you. It becomes part of the deep memory of the body, a reference point for stillness that you can return to in any moment of any day. Then, without deciding, without commanding, you allow the seventh stage to occur. This is Hana, the release. Your right fingers, which have been wrapped around the string with a specific learned grip, simply loosen. There is no pluck, no jerk, no conscious opening of the hand. The string escapes as if it had been held only by a wish, and the bow speaks its deep, ringing thrum that fills the dojo from floor to ceiling. The arrow flies, invisible in its speed, a straight line of energy that bridges the space between you and the target in a fraction of a heartbeat. Your body remains in the extended posture, your left arm still pushing, your right hand now open and relaxed beside your ear, and you do not watch the arrow, because watching would imply a separation between you and the shot. Instead, you simply continue, the shot completing itself while you remain in the center of it. The eighth and final stage is Zanshin, the lingering form, the continuation of the shot after the arrow has flown. You remain in the extended posture, your body still holding the shape of Kai, your eyes still resting on the target, your breathing still suspended in the aftermath of the release. Across the room, the arrow strikes the straw mat with that low, solid thump that you know so well, and the shaft stands quivering for a moment before settling into stillness. But you are not concerned with the arrow, you are concerned with the quality of your presence. Zanshin is the harvest of the shot, the moment when the energy that has been gathered and focused is allowed to dissipate naturally, without grasping or regret. You feel the bow's vibrations fade through your left hand, the tremors traveling up your arm and into your shoulder, diminishing with each passing second until the bow is as still as a branch on a windless day. You feel your breath return, first as a shallow exhale, then as a deeper inhale that fills the space your held breath has left. You feel your heartbeat, which had been slow and steady, now adjust to the new stillness. You feel the dojo around you, the warm wood, the dry straw, the patient light, and you feel yourself as part of it, not separate, not apart. After a long moment, you lower the bow. Your left arm descends with the same smoothness with which it rose, and the lower tip comes to rest once more on the tatami. Your right hand drops to your side, and you turn your head slightly to look at the target, seeing the arrow standing among its companions, the cluster of shafts growing denser around the center. You exhale fully, a long, soft release of air that you did not know you were holding, and you allow your posture to relax, your shoulders dropping, your knees softening. The sequence is complete. The 8 stages have been walked through like rooms in a familiar house, and you stand now in the quiet that follows, a quiet that is deeper and richer than the quiet that came before. The afternoon light has shifted while you were practicing, the shadows lengthening by a small but noticeable amount, and the air has taken on that particular quality of late afternoon, a slight cooling, a slight softening, a hint of the evening that is still hours away, but already preparing itself in the wings. You do not immediately begin another shot. Instead, you walk to the target and retrieve the arrow, pulling it from the straw with a straight, steady motion, and you return it to the quiver. Then you stand at the center of the dojo, your hands resting at your sides, and you simply absorb the stillness you have created. A stillness that is not empty but full, not silent but resonant, not an ending but a pause in a rhythm that will continue for as long as you continue. The 8 stages have been your companions today, as they have been every day, and they will be your companions again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, each repetition a little different, each shot a new expression of an ancient form, each breath a small renewal of the bond between the archer, the bow, and the quiet mountain that holds them both. The afternoon practice continues in its quiet, measured rhythm, each shot following the 8 stages like footsteps following a familiar path, and then, some time after the 15th arrow or perhaps the 16th, you notice a change in the light. The golden rectangles that have been falling through the open shutters and stretching across the tatami suddenly dim, as if a hand has been passed slowly over the sun. You look up from the shooting line, your bow held loosely at your side, and through the nearest window you see that the sky, which was a pale washed blue only a short while ago, has thickened into a uniform soft grey, the color of unpolished silver. The single cloud that drifted across the valley earlier has multiplied. Now a whole fleet of clouds moves in from the west, their undersides flat and dark, their tops billowing upward in slow, lazy rolls. The air that comes through the open shutters has changed too, carrying a new coolness and a new scent, the smell of wet stone and approaching rain, a smell that is both clean and ancient. You lower the bow and walk to the middle window, standing with your hands resting on the wooden sill and looking out at the sky's transformation. The changes come without drama or suddenness. It is simply a shift from one kind of day to another, the mountain accepting the rain as calmly as it accepted the sun. The pine trees below the dojo have darkened, their green needles taking on a deeper, almost black hue against the grey sky, and the bamboo grove sways with a new restlessness. The slender calms bending and recovering in gusts of wind that have not yet reached the dojo, but are clearly on their way. Far across the valley, a pale curtain of falling rain is already visible, a hazy veil that connects the cloud to the forest, and as you watch, that curtain advances slowly toward you, erasing the far ridge, then the middle ridge, then the near slope, a patient grey eraser moving across the landscape. You return to the shooting line and consider the target mat, which sits where it has sat all day, its worn concentric circles, patient and unchanged. The rain has not yet reached the dojo, and the breeze, though fresher than before, is still light enough that your arrows will fly true. You decide to continue practicing, to shoot a few more arrows before the weather makes it impractical, and so you lift the bow, select an arrow from the quiver, and settle into the ahibumi, your feet finding their familiar placement on the woven straw. The first drops arrive just as you reach kai, the full draw, your body locked into its perfect cross, the arrow point aligned with the target's center. You hear the drops, before you feel them, a faint, scattered patter on the cedar shingles overhead, a sound so light it might be mistaken for pine needles falling. Then a single drop, larger than the rest, falls through the open shutters and lands on the veranda just outside, a dark spot on the pale wood that expands slowly and then is joined by another and another. You release the arrow, and its flight coincides with a sudden increase in the rainfall. The scattered patter becomes a steady whisper, and the whisper becomes a low, steady drumming as the rain settles into its rhythm. The arrow strikes the target with its familiar thump, the sound slightly muted by the new acoustic of the rain-filled air, and you stand in zanshin, your extended arms feeling the cool moisture that now drifts through the open windows, a fine mist that you cannot see but can feel on your cheeks and on the backs of your hands. The bow's vibrations fade through your left palm, and you listen to the rain's voice, which is not a single sound, but a layered chorus of many sounds: the drumming on the roof shingles, the softer pattering on the pine needles outside, the drip of water beginning to fall from the eaves onto the stone channel below, the distant rush of the stream that will soon grow fuller with the new water. You lower the bow and walk to the open shutters. The rain is now falling steadily, a straight, grey rain without wind or slant, each drop descending with a quiet purpose. You lean slightly forward and look out. The world has been transformed into a soft watercolor. The distant mountains now only faint suggestions behind the moving veil. The nearby pines dark and glistening, their needles holding tiny droplets that tremble and fall in a continuous sparkling procession. The air is cool and alive with the smell of wet earth, damp cedar, and the particular fresh sharpness that comes when rain meets pine resin. A single drop falls from the edge of the shutter frame and lands on your wrist, cold and startling, and you watch it run in a thin trail down your skin before you wipe it away. You decide to move the target mat a little further under the eaves, not because the rain is entering the dojo in any significant way, but because the mist that drifts through the windows will, over time, dampen the straw and make the arrows harder to retrieve. You walk to the far end of the room, and with both hands you lift the front edge of the mat and drag it backward toward the wall, a distance of perhaps 2 arm lengths. The mat is heavy and resists slightly, its rough underside catching on the tatami, but you move it with slow, patient tugs until it sits entirely under the shelter of the roof overhang, where the slanting rain cannot reach it. You smooth the surface with your palms, pressing the straw flat, and then you walk back to the shooting line, adjusting your position by taking 1 step forward so that the distance remains correct. The rain intensifies. What was a steady drumming becomes a full, resonant roar, the sound of countless drops striking the cedar shingles in a continuous, overlapping rhythm. The dojo, which has been a space of quiet all day, is now filled with this new sound, and yet the quiet has not been lost. It has simply changed its character, becoming a quiet within the rain, rather than a quiet against the silence. The rain encloses the dojo in a shell of sound, a white noise that muffles the bird calls and the stream and the wind, leaving only the rain itself. And within that shell the interior space feels even more sheltered, even more calm. The light has dimmed further, the grey sky allowing only a soft, diffuse illumination through the open shutters, and the corners of the dojo have retreated into a gentle shadow. It is an afternoon twilight, a premature dusk, and you find that it suits the practice, adding a layer of introspection to each movement. You resume shooting, but the rain has changed the conditions in ways both obvious and subtle. The string, for one, feels slightly different under your fingers, the waxed hemp absorbing moisture from the air and becoming a fraction heavier, a fraction less slick. You notice this as you nock the next arrow. The click is still there, still precise, but it is a softer click, muted by the thin film of dampness. When you draw, the string's resistance feels the same, but the sound of the draw, the low hum of the bending bow, is now barely audible beneath the rain's voice. You realize that you are relying less on sound and more on the felt sensations, the vibration through your left hand, the pressure against your back, the alignment of your bones. The rain has taken away one dimension of the practice and replaced it with another, a trade you accept without judgment. The arrow flies, and you watch it arc across the dim room, its white feathers a brief streak in the grey light. It strikes the mat with a sound that is now almost entirely absorbed by the rain, a small thump that is there and then gone, swallowed by the larger rhythm. The shaft quivers, and you see a tiny spray of moisture fly from the feathers, drops that had gathered during the arrow's passage through the misty air. You walk to the target to retrieve the arrow, and as you pull it from the straw, you notice that the point is cool to the touch, almost cold, the steel having been chilled by its brief flight through the rain-saturated air. You dry the point on your sleeve, a small habitual gesture, and then you return to the line. Between shots, you find yourself listening to the rain with a deeper attention. The sound is not uniform. It has variations and textures that reveal themselves the longer you attend to it. There is the main drumming on the roof, a low, continuous note that vibrates through the ceiling beams and into the air of the dojo. Beneath that, there is the lighter, more delicate sound of rain striking the pine needles, the hissing whisper that rises and falls as the breeze shifts. There is the drip from the eaves, a series of individual notes that fall into the stone drainage channel with a musical plinking, each drop a small clear tone that sounds at irregular intervals. And there is the distant sound of the stream, which is now growing louder, its voice changing from a murmur to a rush as the rainwater begins to find its way down the mountain and into the watercourse. These layers of sound weave together into a tapestry that is constantly changing and yet constantly the same, a background that soothes rather than distracts. You shoot another arrow and then another, and each one teaches you something small about shooting in the rain. The feathers, when damp, do not catch the air in quite the same way. The arrow's flight is a fraction slower, a fraction less crisp. The grip of the bow feels different under your palm, the cord wrapping having absorbed a tiny amount of moisture and become slightly more textured, slightly more grippy. Your own body feels different too. The cool air has lowered your skin temperature, and your muscles, which were warm and loose in the morning sun, are now tighter, requiring a longer warm-up before each shot. You adjust all of these changes without conscious thought, your body's wisdom adapting to the new conditions as naturally as the mountain adapts to the rain. After a time, you pause and walk to the open shutters, standing before the middle window and looking out into the grey world. The rain falls in steady sheets, each drop a thin silver line against the dark green of the pines. The veranda is wet and gleaming, the wooden boards turn dark by the water, and along its edge a line of drops hangs from the roof beam, each one growing fat and heavy before releasing and falling into the channel below. The stone channel, which was dry this morning, now carries a small busy stream of clear water that runs along the side of the dojo and disappears around the corner, joining the larger flow that heads down the mountain. The air is fresh and cold on your face, and you breathe it in deeply, feeling it clean your lungs and clear your mind. You stand there for a long moment, your hands resting on the damp sill, and you watch a single pine needle, carried by a drop of rain, slide down the roof shingle and fall, turning over and over until it lands in the channel and is swept away. You turn back to the dojo and notice that the rain has brought a new quality of stillness to the interior space. The shadows in the corners have deepened to a soft charcoal, and the light that enters through the windows is now a uniform, pearly grey that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. The bow rack, the quiver, the target, all the familiar objects of the dojo appear slightly different in this light, their edges softened, their colours muted, as if they have been drawn in charcoal on rice paper. The air inside the dojo is cooler now, and it carries the smell of wet cedar and damp straw, a smell that is earthy and comforting, the smell of a place that is lived in and cared for. You return to the shooting line and lift the bow once more. The practice continues, but it has become a different practice now, a rain practice, a practice of listening as much as doing. Each shot is accompanied by the steady drumming overhead, and each stanchion is filled with the sound of water flowing, dripping, rushing. You lose count of the arrows, they come and go in their quiet cycle, and you are simply present in the middle of it, a still point in a world of motion and sound. The afternoon passes in this way, slow and calm, the rain falling without cease, the mountain drinking it in, and you, the archer, standing on the shooting line, drawing and releasing, a small part of the great, quiet rhythm of the rain. The rain continues its steady rhythm on the cedar shingles, a sound that has become so constant over the afternoon that it now registers not as noise but as a kind of extended silence, a background against which smaller sounds emerge and fade. The light through the open shutters has dimmed another full shade, the pearly grey darkening toward a soft charcoal, and you can feel in the air that the day is beginning its slow turn toward evening. The muscles in your shoulders and back, warm and loose from the hours of practice, now carry a pleasant heaviness that tells you the shooting is done, that the time for putting things away has arrived, and you accept this signal from your body as you have accepted every other signal today, without resistance and without hurry. You retrieve the last arrow from the target mat, pulling it from the straw with the same straight, steady motion you have used all day, and you stand for a moment with the arrow in your hand, looking at the cluster of punctures that now fills the central circle of the target, a dense constellation of small dark holes, each marking a flight, a breath, a moment of kai. The straw around the holes is slightly frayed, and you smooth it with your thumb, pressing the disturbed fibers back into place, a small act of care that will extend the mat's usefulness for many more practices. Then you turn and walk to the quiver, sliding the last arrow into its place among the others, the shafts clicking softly against one another as they settle, the feathers brushing with a dry whisper. The bow still rests in your left hand, its lower tip touching the tatami, its upper limb rising past your shoulder, and you realize that you have been holding it for so long that it has become almost a part of your body, an extension of your arm and your intention. Now comes the time to separate from it, to return it to its resting state, and you approach this task with the same deliberate care that you bring to every other action in the dojo. You walk to the center of the room where the light, even in its dimness, is still adequate for close work, and you begin the process of unstringing. The unstringing of a yumi is a slow and careful operation, for the bow is long and under considerable tension, and a rushed or careless movement could twist the limbs or damage the string. You hold the bow before you with your left hand at the grip, and you bring the lower tip to rest on the tatami, pressing it down gently to secure it. Then you place your right hand on the upper limb near the tip, and you bend the bow slightly by pushing forward with your left hand while pulling back with your right, flexing the bamboo just enough to relieve the tension on the string. The string slackens, its tight straight line becoming a loose curve, and with your right thumb and forefinger you work the loop free from the upper nock, easing it out of the antler groove with a small, precise movement. The string comes free with a soft twang, a brief vibration that travels up your arm and then fades, and the bow straightens in your hands, its limbs relaxing into their natural unstrung curve, the compressed energy of months of tension released in an instant. You hold the unstrung bow in both hands and examine it, turning it slowly to inspect every part. The bamboo is in good condition, the pale outer layer showing no cracks or splinters, the darker inner layers tightly bonded, the rattan bindings still firm and evenly spaced. The grip cord is slightly darkened where your palm has rested, a faint impression of your hand that has built up over countless practices, and you run your thumb over it, feeling the familiar texture. The upper and lower nocks, those small antler inlays, are smooth and unblemished, the grooves clean and free of wear. Satisfied with your inspection, you carry the bow to the rack and place it gently in its cradle, the unstrung limbs curving in their graceful asymmetry against the dark wood of the rack. Now you take up the soft cotton cloth from the shelf, the same one you used this morning to wipe the tatami, and you find that it has dried completely in the hours since, its surface clean and cool. You carry it to the bow rack and begin to wipe the entire length of the yumi, starting at the upper tip and working downward with slow, overlapping strokes. The cloth glides over the smooth bamboo, picking up the faintest traces of dust and the invisible oils left by your hands. And as you wipe, you pay attention to every small detail, the way the grain of the bamboo runs in fine, parallel lines, the way the rattan bindings feel slightly rough under the cloth, the way the antler tips gleam with a dull, creamy luster when they are cleaned. The wiping is a quiet meditation, a way of thanking the bow for its service, and you do it with the same unhurried attention that you bring to the shooting itself. When the bow is completely wiped, you return the cloth to the shelf and take up the small ceramic pot of camellia oil. The pot is simple and unadorned, a small round vessel with a fitted lid, and when you remove the lid, the scent of the oil rises into the air, a clean, nutty fragrance that is subtle but distinct, the smell of preservation and care. You dip the tip of your index finger into the oil, taking up only a small amount, and you begin to apply it to the bow, starting once again at the upper limb. You rub the oil into the bamboo with slow, circular motions, feeling the smooth surface become slightly slick under your finger, the oil spreading into a thin, even film that darkens the pale bamboo by a shade and brings out the richness of the grain. You work your way down the entire length of the bow, limb by limb, paying special attention to the rattan bindings, working the oil into the tight coils where dust and moisture might otherwise collect. The oil soaks into the rattan, darkening it from amber to a deeper brown, and it gives the bindings a slight flexibility that will help them grip the bamboo as the bow flexes. You oil the grip cord last, rubbing the oil into the dark wrapping with gentle, patient circles, and you feel the cord become supple under your touch, the texture slightly tacky, ready for your hand to find it again tomorrow. When the bow is fully oiled, you wipe your fingers on a small rag that you keep for this purpose, and you replace the lid on the ceramic pot, returning it to its place on the shelf. The bow gleams softly in the dim light, its entire surface alive with a subtle sheen that speaks of care and attention. You step back and look at it resting in its rack, and you feel a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but simply the contentment of a task done properly. The arrows are next. You walk to the quiver and lift it from its stand, carrying it to the center of the room where you sit down on the tatami, crossing your legs beneath you. You draw the arrows out one by one, laying them in a neat row on the mat before you, their shafts parallel, their feathers aligned. Each arrow you inspect individually, holding it up before your eyes and sighting along its length to check for any warp or bend. The bamboo shafts are all still true, the grain running straight from knob to point, and you run your thumb and forefinger along each one, feeling for any roughness or splintering. A few of the shafts have picked up tiny fibers from the straw target, and these you remove with a light rub of your thumb, smoothing the bamboo back to its clean finish. The feathers require particular attention. The dampness of the rainy air has affected them slightly, the barbs having absorbed moisture and become a little clumped, a little less smooth than they were this morning. You take each arrow and hold it close to your face, examining the 3 feathers in turn, and then you use your fingers to gently smooth the barbs back into alignment, stroking from the base of the feather toward the tip with a light, careful pressure. The hawk feathers, dark brown and glossy, respond quickly to this attention, their barbs separating and lying flat again, the natural oils in the feather helping to restore the smooth surface. The heron feather, the soft grey-white one, takes a little more care, its barbs being finer and more delicate, but you work on it patiently, and soon it too is smooth and even. When each arrow's feathers are aligned, you set it aside in a new row, the cleaned and inspected arrows forming a second neat line on the tatami. The points come last. You take up each arrow and examine the small leaf-shaped steel blade at its tip, looking for any dullness, any burrs, any signs of rust. The points are all still sharp and clean, the polished steel gleaming, even in the dim light, but you wipe each one with the corner of the cleaning cloth anyway, removing the tiny fragments of straw that have adhered to the metal. One of the points has a minute burr on its edge, a tiny roughness that you can feel with your thumb, and you take up a small whetstone from the shelf, a flat grey stone that fits in your palm, and you draw the point across it with a single, light stroke. The burr disappears, the edge becoming smooth again, and you return the stone to its place. The string now requires your care. You pick it up from where it has been resting on the tatami, a coiled loop of waxed hemp that still carries the shape of the bow's tension. You stretch it out to its full length, holding one end in each hand, and you run your fingers along its entire length, feeling for any fraying, any thinning, any rough spots where the wax has worn away. The string is in good condition, the hemp fibers still tightly twisted, the wax coating still even and protective. You fold a clean section of the cotton cloth over the string and draw it through, pinching lightly so that the cloth removes any dirt or old wax, and the string emerges slightly tacky, its surface renewed. Then you take the small pot of wax from the shelf, a darker, firmer wax than the camellia oil, and you rub a thin layer along the entire string, working it into the fibers with your fingers, feeling the wax melt slightly from the warmth of your skin. The string becomes supple and slightly glossy, ready to be coiled. Coiling the string is a precise task, one that prevents tangles and kinks. You hold one end in your left hand and begin to loop the string in a figure-8 pattern around your thumb and forefinger, creating a neat coil about the size of your palm. Each loop lies flat against the ones before, and when the entire string is coiled, you tuck the free end under the last loop to secure it. The finished coil is a compact, tidy circle of dark hemp, and you place it in its small cloth pouch, a bag of soft cotton that has been sewn specifically for this purpose, with a simple drawstring closure. You pull the drawstring tight and set the pouch on the shelf beside the oil and the whetstone. You stand and stretch, your back and shoulders responding with a pleasant ache that speaks of the day's honest work. The dojo around you is now noticeably darker, the grey light from the windows having faded to a deep twilight blue, and the rain continues its steady drumming overhead, a sound that has accompanied your work like a quiet companion. You walk to the quiver and return the cleaned arrows to it, sliding each one into place with care, and then you carry the quiver to its stand and set it upright. The bow rack holds the gleaming, oiled yumi, the quiver stands full and ready, the target mat rests against the wall, and the dojo is almost ready for the night. The final task is sweeping. You take the small broom from its hook near the entrance, a simple tool made of bundled bamboo grass tied to a wooden handle, its bristles worn to an uneven edge from years of use. You begin at the far corner, the one opposite the entrance, and you sweep the tatami in slow, even strokes, moving from the back wall toward the door. The broom gathers almost nothing, only a few pine needles that the wind and rain have blown through the open shutters, their brown shapes standing out against the pale straw. You sweep them into a small pile, then scoop them up with your hand and carry them to the open window, where you toss them out into the rain, watching them fall and disappear into the wet darkness below. You return the broom to its hook, and you stand in the center of the dojo, listening to the rain and the quiet, feeling the peace of a space that has been used well and cared for completely. The dojo stands quiet around you in the deepening twilight, the open shutters now framing rectangles of deep blue-gray sky instead of the pale gold of morning, and the steady drumming of the rain on the cedar shingles has settled into a softer, more intermittent rhythm, a gentle patter that pauses and resumes, as if the rain itself is growing tired. You stand at the center of the tatami, the broom now returned to its hook, your hands resting at your sides, and you feel the particular stillness of a day that has been fully lived, a stillness that is not empty but complete, like the silence that is not empty but complete, like the silence that follows the last note of a long song. The air inside the dojo has cooled considerably, carrying the freshness of the rain-washed forest and the faint, clean scent of the camellia oil you rubbed into the bow, and the shadows in the corners have pooled into a soft, velvety darkness that seems to deepen as you watch. It is time to close the dojo for the night, to seal the space into its own quiet rest until the morning returns. You walk to the far wall, where the row of open shutters looks out onto the darkening forest, and you begin with the one farthest to the right, the one nearest the corner, the same sequence you followed this morning, but in reverse. You place your fingertips on the wooden frame and slide the panel sideways along its track, a motion that requires a steady, even pressure, and the shutter moves with a low rumble that seems louder now in the rain-softened quiet, a sound that echoes briefly against the high ceiling beams. The rectangle of grey light that the shutter had admitted disappears, and the tatami beneath it fades into shadow. You move to the next shutter and slide it closed, then the next, and with each closing the dojo grows dimmer and more intimate, the outside world retreating step by step until only the sounds remain, the patter of rain on the roof, the distant rush of the swollen stream, the occasional drip of water from the eaves into the stone channel below. As you close each shutter, you pause to look out one last time at the forest that has been your silent companion throughout the day. Through the fourth window, the one that frames the pine trunk with its rough bark, you can see that the rain has beaded on every needle, turning the pine into a constellation of tiny trembling droplets that catch the last faint light from the sky and glisten like cold stars. Through the sixth window, the one that looks down the mountainside, you can see the valley far below, now completely obscured by mist and cloud, a sea of grey that fills the low places and rises up the slopes in slow, drifting billows. The bamboo grove sways gently, its leaves heavy with water, and a single drop falls from a leaf tip, catching the light for an instant before vanishing into the darkness below. You take these images in without grasping at them, letting them be what they are, and then you slide the shutters closed, one after another, until the entire wall is sealed and the dojo is a space entirely unto itself. With the shutters closed, the interior of the dojo is now almost completely dark, lit only by the faintest grey glow that seeps through the paper panels of the sliding door and the thin gaps where the shutters meet their frames. The darkness is not absolute, but graduated, shades of charcoal and slate and deep blue that your eyes slowly learn to distinguish. You can still see the outline of the bow rack against the wall, the darker shape of the quiver standing beside it, the pale rectangle of the target mat rolled in the corner, and the low shelf near the entrance with its small gathering of clay and ceramic vessels. The ceiling beams have disappeared into the shadow overhead, and the far corners are now so dark that they seem to recede into a depthless void, making the dojo feel at once smaller and infinitely larger, a room that contains both the intimacy of shelter and the mystery of the night. You walk to the entrance alcove, where a small shelf holds the few items needed for the evening: a paper lantern, a flint striker, a small clay dish of oil, and a bundle of rush wicks. You take up the lantern first, a simple cylinder of thin paper stretched over a bamboo frame, its paper the color of warm cream, its surface unadorned except for a single faint brush stroke that might be a character or might simply be a mark. The lantern is light in your hands, almost weightless, and you carry it to the center of the dojo, placing it on the tatami where you will sit. Then you return to the shelf and take up the flint and the dish of oil, carrying them with the same care. Kneeling on the tatami beside the lantern, you arrange the items before you, the lantern to your left, the oil dish to your right, the flint striker in front. You lift the lantern's paper shade carefully, setting it aside, and you take one of the rush wicks from the bundle, a slender, pale brown cord about the length of your hand, twisted from dried rushes and soaked in oil long ago. You dip the wick into the oil dish, letting it absorb a small amount of fresh oil, and then you insert it into the small metal holder at the lantern's base, adjusting it so that it stands upright. The smell of the oil rises around you, a mild, nutty fragrance that mingles with the cedar and the damp straw. Now you take up the flint striker, a simple tool of hardened steel shaped like a narrow loop, and the flint stone, a dark, glassy rock that fits in your palm. You hold the striker in your right hand and the flint in your left, positioning them close to the wick, and you strike the steel against the stone with a quick, practiced motion. A small spark flies, a brief orange flash that illuminates your hands for an instant and then dies. You strike again, and another spark, brighter this time, arcs through the air and lands on the oil-soaked wick. The wick catches with a tiny blue-orange flame that flickers and wavers, almost going out, then steadies and grows into a small, bright point of light. You watch it for a moment, making sure it has taken hold, and then you replace the paper shade over the flame, fitting it carefully onto the bamboo frame. The lantern glows to life, its paper shade diffusing the small flame into a warm golden sphere of light that pushes back the darkness in a circle about the width of your outstretched arms. The light is soft and gentle, the color of honey held up to the sun, and it illuminates the tatami around you with a warm radiance that makes the woven straw glow. The shadows that were absolute now recede to the edges of the room, still present but no longer complete, and the dojo is transformed from a space of darkness into a space of gentle, flickering twilight, the light pulsing almost imperceptibly as the small flame dances on its wick. The paper of the lantern is thin enough that you can see the shadow of the bamboo frame through it, a delicate lattice of darker lines against the warm gold. You sit back on your heels and then shift into Caesar, the formal kneeling posture, folding your legs beneath you so that your weight rests on your shins and the tops of your feet lie flat against the tatami. Your hands come to rest on your thighs, palms down, fingers relaxed, and you straighten your spine, feeling it rise from your pelvis like a stalk of bamboo, flexible and strong. Your shoulders drop, your chin levels, and your gaze softens, resting on the lantern's warm glow without focusing on any particular point. The posture is one you have assumed thousands of times, and it feels as natural as standing or walking, a position of alert rest that allows the body to settle while the mind remains awake. You close your eyes and the world becomes the sound of the rain and the feeling of your own breathing. The rain has softened further, now just a light patter on the shingles, a gentle, intermittent sound that comes and goes like the breath of some vast, sleepy creature. Beneath it, the stream continues its distant rush, fuller and louder than it was this morning, and occasionally a single drop falls from the eaves into the stone channel with a clear, musical plink. These sounds rise and fall in no particular pattern, and you let them be, neither clinging to them nor pushing them away. Your breathing deepens naturally, your belly expanding with each inhale and softening with each exhale, a slow tide that moves through your body without effort. You begin to review the day's practice, not as a mental list or a judgment of performance, but as a flowing series of sensations that pass through your awareness, like leaves floating on a stream. You feel the cool morning air on your face as you walk the mountain path in the early light, the mist clinging to the cedar branches, the smoothness of the worn stepping stones under your sandals. You feel the weight of the bow in your left hand, the slight tackiness of the grip cord, the way the string pressed against your collarbone at full draw. You feel the vibration of the release traveling up your arm, the deep thrum of the string that filled the dojo from floor to ceiling, and the solid, satisfying thump of the arrow striking the straw mat. You feel the warmth of the midday sun on your shoulders as you sat on the veranda, the taste of the rice ball and the cool water, the sight of the small brown bird preening on the railing. You feel the cool moisture of the rain-saturated air, the sound of the drops drumming on the roof, the way the bowstring felt slightly heavier under your fingers. And you feel the quiet satisfaction of cleaning and oiling the bow, the smooth glide of the cloth over the bamboo, the nutty scent of the camellia oil rising in the dim light. These sensations come and go without any effort to hold them, each one arising, lingering for a moment, and then fading into the next. You are not thinking about the practice. You're simply allowing the practice to move through you one more time, a final, gentle repetition that requires no action, only presence. Your body remembers everything, and as you sit in the lantern's warm glow, you feel the day settle into your bones and muscles, a deep, pleasant tiredness that is not exhaustion but completion, the feeling of a day that has been fully lived in every small detail. The lantern flickers once, the flame bending as if touched by an invisible breath, and then it steadies again, its warm light unbroken. The single flicker reminds you that the oil will not last forever, that the evening is advancing toward night, and that soon you will need to extinguish the flame and make your way home. But there is no hurry. The moment is still full, and you remain in Caesar, your eyes still closed, your breathing still slow and deep, your body still and quiet. You listen now with a deeper attention, letting the sounds of the evening wash over you without naming them. The rain has almost stopped, just a few last drops falling from the eaves, and in its absence the other sounds emerge more clearly. The soft sigh of the wind moving through the wet pine needles, the distant call of an evening bird, a single long note that rises and falls, the faint rustle of some small animal moving through the underbrush below the dojo. The stream is the constant beneath it all, its voice a low, steady murmur that has been there since before you arrived and will be there long after you leave, a voice that speaks of patience and endurance and the slow passage of water down the mountain. You open your eyes, and the lantern's glow welcomes you back, its small flame still steady, its paper shade still warm. The dojo has become a small world of light in the vast darkness of the mountain night, and you sit at its center, a still figure in a pool of gold, surrounded by the soft shadows and the quiet sounds. You feel a deep sense of peace, not a peace that you have achieved or earned, but a peace that has simply arrived, like the rain, like the night, like the end of a day that asked nothing more than your complete attention. You remain in this peace for a long moment, your hands resting on your thighs, your breath moving in and out, with the slow rhythm of the mountain itself, and then, with a gentle exhale, you prepare to rise, to extinguish the lantern, and to begin the walk home. You rise from Caesar with the same slow, deliberate motion that has carried you through every action of this day, placing one hand on the tatami beside your knee, and pushing yourself up without hurry, feeling your knees and ankles adjust to the shift in weight, your spine uncurling, your shoulders settling back into their natural place. The lantern continues to glow at the center of the dojo, its small flame steady behind the paper shade, casting a worn circle of light that seems even more precious now that the shutters are closed and the night has fully claimed the world outside. You stand for a moment looking down at the lantern, at the way its light pulls on the woven straw and catches the fine texture of the tatami, at the way your own shadow stretches long and soft across the mats behind you, and you feel a quiet gratitude for this small flame that has accompanied your evening meditation, a companion that asks nothing and gives everything. The time has come to extinguish the light, to close the dojo completely, and to begin the walk home. You kneel once more beside the lantern, not in scissor this time, but in a simpler crouch, and you reach for the paper shade, lifting it carefully from the bamboo frame and setting it aside on the tatami. The small flame, now unshaded, burns bright and clear, a pointed tongue of blue and orange that wavers slightly in the movement of air caused by your hands. You look at it for a moment, this tiny fire that has been your companion through the twilight, and then you lean forward and blow gently across the wick, a soft, steady breath that makes the flame dance once, twice, and then vanish, leaving behind a thin trail of pale smoke that curls upward and dissolves into the darkness. The smell of the extinguished wick rises into the air, a faint waxy scent that mingles with the oil and the cedar, and the dojo is now completely dark, darker even than before you lit the lantern, your eyes having grown accustomed to the warm glow and now needing to adjust all over again. You remain still in the darkness, letting your vision slowly adapt, letting the shapes of the room re-emerge from the blackness. The bow rack becomes a faint silhouette against the wall, the quiver a darker column beside it, the target matte, a low, pale shape in the corner. The faint grey glow at the edges of the door, where the paper panels admit the last residue of the night sky, provides just enough light to navigate by, and you rise to your feet, gathering the lantern, the flint, and the oil dish from the tatami, carrying them back to the entrance alcove where they belong. You place each item on its designated spot on the shelf, the lantern on the left, the flint beside it, the oil dish on the right, the bundle of rush wicks tucked into their small ceramic holder. The shelf is now as neat and orderly as it was this morning, everything in its place, everything ready for the next dawn. You turn and look back into the dojo, though in the darkness there is little to see, only the deeper shadows and the faint outlines of the familiar objects. But looking is not only about seeing, it is also about acknowledging, about saying a wordless farewell to the space that has held your practice throughout this long, quiet day. You stand at the threshold between the tatami and the entrance step, and you bow once from the waist, a slow, respectful bow that expresses everything you feel and nothing that needs to be said. The dojo receives your bow in silence, as it always has, and then you straighten up and turn toward the sliding door. Your sandals wait on the stone step, their woven straw darkened by the dampness of the rainy afternoon, their shape still molded to your feet. You slip them on, feeling the familiar texture against your soles, and then you place your hand on the wooden frame of the door. The door slides open with its low, resonant rumble, a sound that you have heard twice today already, once at dawn and once at midday, and now a third time at night, each occurrence marking a transition in the day's long rhythm. The cool night air pours through the opening, fresh and clean and cold, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine, and the faint, distant sweetness of night-blooming flowers somewhere on the mountain. You step out onto the veranda and slide the door closed behind you, hearing it settle into its frame with a soft thump, sealing the dojo into its darkness and its rest. The veranda is wet underfoot, the wooden boards dark with moisture and gleaming faintly in the starlight. The rain has stopped completely now, the last drops having fallen while you sat in meditation, and the clouds that brought the rain are breaking apart overhead, their dark masses thinning and separating to reveal patches of clear night sky. In those patches, the stars shine with a brilliance that only comes after rain, when the air has been washed clean of dust and haze, each star a sharp, cold point of light that seems close enough to touch. You step to the edge of the veranda and look up, your face tilted toward the sky, and you let the starlight fall on your skin. A light so faint it carries no warmth, only a cool, distant beauty that has traveled across unimaginable distances to reach this moment. The mountain path waits for you at the edge of the clearing, a pale ribbon of packed earth and stone that winds downward through the dark forest, its surface still wet from the rain, its familiar landmarks now altered by shadow and starlight. You adjust the carrying cloth under your arm, the same cloth that held your rice bowl and water jug this morning, now empty and light, and you begin to walk. The first section of the path leads through the stand of tall sugi cedars, their trunks rising straight and dark on either side, their crowns lost in the darkness overhead. The ground underfoot is springy with wet needles, your footsteps making a soft, squelching sound that is different from the dry whisper of the morning, a sound that speaks of water and saturation, and the forest drinking its fill. You walk with the same measured pace you've used all day, a pace that is neither hurried nor hesitant, and in the darkness your other senses come alive to guide you. Your feet know this path, know every stone and root and turn, and they find their way by a memory that is deeper than thought, a memory stored in the soles and the ankles and the subtle shifts of balance. Your ears pick up the sounds of the night forest, the steady drip of water from the cedar branches, each drop landing on the wet earth with a soft pat. The distant call of an owl, a low, resonant hoot that repeats at long intervals, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, the rustle of some small creature moving through the underbrush, a brief scuffling sound that stops when you pass and then resumes when you have gone. Your skin feels the coolness of the air, the occasional brush of a wet fern frond against your sleeve, the slight give of the muddy patches where the rain has pooled and not yet drained away. The path levels out at the place where the stone wall runs alongside, the same wall you passed this morning when it was covered with moss in shades of emerald and olive. In the darkness the moss is invisible, but you reach out and touch it with your fingertips, feeling its cool, spongy texture, its surface heavy with absorbed rainwater. A single drop falls from the wall onto your hand, and you feel it run down your finger and drip onto the path. You continue walking, and soon you reach the stream crossing, the same place where you paused at dawn to drink and wash your face. The stream has changed since this morning. The rain has swelled it, and it now runs faster and fuller, its voice a loud, rushing song that fills the night. The stepping stones are still there, but the water flows over the lower ones, covering them with a thin, rippling sheet, and you pause at the edge to consider your crossing. The stones you can see are slick with water, their surfaces gleaming in the starlight, and you step onto the first one with care, feeling its solidity under your sandal, the water tugging gently at the straw. You cross one stone at a time, slow and steady, and when you reach the middle you pause and look down at the water rushing past, its surface a dark, moving mirror that catches fragments of starlight and carries them downstream, a flowing constellation of cold white sparks. From the stream the path begins its final descent, a series of gentle switchbacks that lead down through the mixed forest of oak and maple, their leaves still wet and dripping, their trunks dark against the paler sky. The clouds have continued to thin, and now more than half the sky is clear, the stars bright and numerous. The Milky Way, a faint dusty band that stretches from one horizon to the other like a river of light. You stop at a turn in the path where a gap in the trees opens a view of the valley below, and you see that the mist that filled the valley this morning has not returned. Instead, the valley floor is a dark basin dotted with a few tiny, warm lights, the lanterns of distant dwellings where other people are ending their days, their glow as small and steady as the stars above. The sight is peaceful, a reminder that you are not alone on this mountain, that other lives are unfolding in their own quiet rhythms, and you stand for a moment taking it in before continuing your descent. The path grows more familiar as you near the bottom, the trees thinning out, the ground leveling, the sound of the stream fading behind you, and being replaced by the closer, softer sounds of the lower forest. A night insect begins to chirp somewhere nearby, a high, thin note that repeats in a steady rhythm, and another insect answers it from further away, the two calls alternating in a patient conversation. The air is slightly warmer here, the cold of the upper mountain giving way to a milder, gentler temperature, and you can smell wood smoke from a chimney, a faint, sweet scent that speaks of home and warmth and the end of the day. The path emerges from the trees, and there, just ahead, is your small dwelling, its roof dark against the starry sky, its paper screens glowing faintly from the single oil lamp you left burning in the alcove this morning. The lamp's light is a welcome sight, a small beacon that has been waiting for your return, and you walk the last stretch of path with a quiet eagerness, your tired legs finding new energy in the nearness of home. You step up to the entrance and remove your sandals, placing them on the stone step beside the door, their wet straw leaving a dark imprint on the stone. The door slides open with a sound that is softer and smaller than the dojo door, a gentle rumble that belongs to this intimate space, and you step inside. The room is exactly as you left it. The futon rolled in the corner, the low wooden chest against the wall, the hanging scroll with its single character in dark ink, the alcove with the branch of mountain cherry still standing in its plain clay vase. The oil lamp on the low shelf burns with a small, steady flame, its light filling the room with a warm, golden glow that is softer even than the lantern in the dojo, a light that speaks of rest and solitude and the quiet hours of the night. You slide the door closed and stand for a moment in the center of the room, letting the warmth and the familiarity wash over you, feeling the day's long journey settle into your bones. You prepare a simple evening meal, moving through the small cooking alcove with the same deliberate care you bring to everything. From a clay pot, you scoop out cooked rice, still faintly warm from the banked coals of the hearth, and you place it in a small bowl, the grains white and glossy in the lamplight. You pour a thin miso soup from a kettle into another bowl, the steam rising with a savory, comforting scent, small pieces of soft tofu and green seaweed floating on its surface. You carry the bowls to the low table and sit cross-legged before them, eating slowly, tasting each mouthful with the same attention you gave to the rice ball at midday, feeling the warmth of the soup spread through your chest and stomach, the rice filling you with a gentle, solid satisfaction. When you finish, you wash the bowls in a small basin of water, drying them with a cloth and returning them to their shelf, and then you stand in the center of the room, feeling the pleasant tiredness that has been growing all evening, now blooming into a deep, quiet readiness for sleep. You unfold the futon from the corner, laying it out on the tatami with smooth, even motions, the cotton mattress fluffing slightly as it expands, the quilt settling on top with its familiar weight. You change into a light sleeping robe, the fabric soft and cool against your skin, and then you extinguish the oil lamp, leaning close to the small flame and blowing it out with a single, gentle breath. The room falls into darkness, but it is a familiar darkness, a safe darkness, the darkness of home, and through the paper screens you can see the faint silver glow of the starlight outside, a soft radiance that outlines the window frame and the shape of the cherry branch in its alcove. You lie down on the futon, pulling the quilt up to your shoulders, feeling the mattress accept your weight, the pillow cradle your head. Your body settles into stillness, and as you close your eyes, the day's rhythm echoes gently in your muscles, the memory of the walk, the draw of the bow, the release, the rain, the lantern, all flowing through you one last time, like a slow, peaceful stream. Your breathing deepens, your heartbeat